Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, I will now continue the unfinished story. Chapter 33. Here I stand within the storm. Su Qian knew about the existence of magic tools and weapons. His uncle mentioned the cannons were a big factor in Dai Feng's victory at the Battle of Shanhai Pass. The cannons were powered by gunpowder and enchantments. The magic weapons were unique to the Dai Feng dynasty. The advantage allowed them to steamroll their enemies and build an empire. At that moment, Su Qian realized there was an intricate relationship between the imperial astronomers and the magic tools. Song Qing wondered for a moment. In the spirit of sharing, he said, "It isn't really a secret anyway. Do you know what the fourth rank sorcery is?" "I don't even know about my own discipline." Su Qian shook his head. "Spell master. Objects created through alchemy can be enchanted. The spell will be carved into the object and a magic tool or weapon is then created," Song Qing explained. Su Qian combined the host's knowledge of sorcery and all that was disclosed by the beautiful woman, Chu Keiwei. There were many things to think of. The 9th rank sorcery medicine is the foundation for the 8th rank sorcery. Qi mastery. Qi mastery is the foundation for the 7th rank sorcery. Feng Shui mastery, but Feng Shui has nothing to do with the 6th ranked alchemy. In turn, alchemy is closely related to the 4th rank sorcery, spell mastery. Alchemists produce strong weapons while spell masters enhance them. Overall, sorcery was a discipline worth looking into. No wonder the principal imperial astronomer had such a high standing in Dai Feng. I must win Chu Keiwei's hand. No ulterior motives. I just want to experience true love in this merciless society, Su Qian vowed in his heart. The second item is also a magic tool, the Guardian Mirror. The build quality is standard, but the enchantment will grant you the ability to withstand 6 blows from a Qi expert. Or 3 blows from a divine class martial artist, but only once if it's an invincible class martial artist, Song Qing said. So that's the 6th rank for martial artists. Su Qian learned something new about his own discipline. Lastly, this liquid is known as the Devourer. Rub it on an arrow and it can take the life of a divine class martial artist. It's useless against an invincible class martial artist as the arrow won't be able to penetrate their skin. Su Qian nodded. I like these gifts. After a pause, he returned the favor. The alchemy which I speak of is grafting. Based on the memories from his past life, Su Qian introduced grafting to Song Qing. The procedure was not clearly detailed, but the benefits were emphasized. For example, a successful graft could improve a crop's frost tolerance, heat tolerance, and pest tolerance. It could also improve the taste and texture of the fruit. The words were like his diary entries, a bunch of theoretical knowledge that required practical evidence. However, that was the least of Su Qian's worries. If Song Qing failed to produce anything fruitful, it would be his incompetence. If something worthwhile came out of all this, Su Qian would be credited. When Su Qian was done explaining, Song Qing was buzzing with joy. His body thrummed with excitement. He could not wait for spring to come so he could test out this wondrous alchemy practice. A godly book. I can't believe such an incredible book about alchemy exists and I never knew about it. Song Qing exclaimed. Thunk. 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 Su Qian descended the staircase of the observatory with mindful steps. The 3 items in his arms were invaluable. I can trade one of them on the black market to open my heaven's gate. But these items are so useful, I'm a bit reluctant. Truly, free women are men's eternal source of happiness. To the playhouse, I go. He did not receive a single coin from the imperial astronomers, but if he sold the magic items, the amount of silver he would receive would make his aunt shut up. Slap my aunt with the silver notes. The imagery made Su Qian's heart leap with joy. After checking that the coast was clear, Su Qian began singing a song from his past life. Here I stand within the storm, hatred cannot mend my heartbreak. Gazing at the sky, as clouds float by, sword in hand, I ask the gods who is the hero. As he turned a corner, he ran into a bunch of strangers. How awkward. The melody died on Su Qian's lips as he quickly pressed himself into the wall to let the group pass. 3 men were heading upstairs. The one in the center wore an indigo robe. He had a handsome countenance with white sideburns that contrasted his black eyes, the man aged like fine wine. He was definitely a daddy type back in the modern world. To his left was a young man who kept his eyes forward. He was silent and uninteractive. To his right was another young man. He wore an evil smirk as he sneered at Su Qian. The young man had delicate features that rivaled his brother's good looks. As the 3 men passed Su Qian, the handsome young man chuckled and side-eyed him. At that moment, Su Qian felt as if he was being stared down by something dangerous. He held his breath as his heart rate picked up. The 3 men carried on with their journey and disappeared into a corner. Only then did Su Qian relax. Did I offend the guy with my singing? He looked as if I was his enemy, Su Qian wondered aloud. I need to pay attention to what I say, especially in public. Examples of quotes I shouldn't say out loud: I want the veil to be lifted from my eyes and the earth to unshackle my heart. I want the Buddhas to be gone. Only with great sacrifice can great changes come. On the 7th floor of the observatory, Songqing stood at the entranceway. He had received a message about visitors. Chu Keiwei chewed on a sugar cane, back against the wall. Her attention was elsewhere as she accompanied Songqing. The 3 men arrived on the 7th floor. Songqing folded his hands in greeting. Elder Wei. The man with the white sideburns acknowledged the greeting. Elder Wei, our mentor drank too much and is taking a nap. Please wait for a moment. The expressionless young man showed no emotions while the handsome young man frowned. The cultivated middle-aged man was unfazed by the revelation and followed Songqing into the tea room. When we were coming up, we ran into an amusing young man. Is that the principal imperial astronomer's new disciple? Before Chu Keiwei could respond, Songqing shot her a warning look. He replied with a smile, just an insignificant person. He had some interesting things to share with us. The night squad had a predatory reputation in the eyes of every official. They did not need a reason to pick on people. Songqing was not sure if Su Qian had inadvertently offended this powerful eunuch. Interesting things. Do tell, said the man of culture with a gentle smile. After a moment's thought, Songqing said, a talented alchemist. If he had not chosen the wrong discipline, his name would have made it into history. He did not tell any falsehoods and hinted at the imperial astronomer's interest in Su Qian. The handsome young man sniggered. The middle-aged man smiled and nodded. In the inner courtyard of the Su manor, Li Ru guided the servants in cloth cutting, sewing, and cotton stuffing. Winter was approaching and Li Ru planned to make some appropriate outfits for the season. Lu Er completed the last stitch and bit off the thread. She surveyed her handiwork and was satisfied with the embroidered lotus flower. It'll look good on Lady Lingyan. My lady, yesterday when I visited the elder son, I realized he doesn't have winter clothing. He was still wearing outfits for fall, Lu Er said in a tentative tone. Li Ru eyed her maidservant and said, what are you trying to say? Lu Er lowered her head and mumbled, we can make one for him. No. That little brat riles me up every chance he gets. You want me to make him an outfit? I won't do it. The other maidservants carried on with their work as if nothing happened. He comes over and eats our food. Never contributed a coin to this house. Lu Er tried to defend Su Qian. Doesn't he contribute the monthly grain he receives? That stone of grain is barely enough to fill his appetite. Li Ru rolled her dazzling eyes. She did not mind improving her relationship with her unlucky nephew, especially since he had saved their family from a life of damnation. However, the little brat had taken every opportunity to jab at her. As the old saying goes, A leopard can't change its spots. The housekeeper rushed by and shouted from the outer courtyard, "My lady, the Lord is back." Chapter 34. Su Lingyu, I'll repay your kindness in full. Liu was in the midst of dissing her nephew when the housekeeper announced the return of her husband. If he's back, he's back. Am I supposed to stand at the gates and welcome him? The housekeeper nearly tripped over his feet when he entered the inner courtyard. My lady, I saw blood on Lady Lingyan's body and Lady Lingyu looked as if she's been crying. The lords also seem upset. The eldest is also not back. Something must have happened. A loud crashing noise was heard as something crashed from a great height. The commotion was followed by concerned voices. My lady! Get out of my way! Liu lifted her dress and rushed to the front hall. An anxiety-filled Liu burst into the front hall with tears pooling in her eyes. She was met with the sight of her husband carrying her unconscious youngest daughter. The tears threatened to spill down her face. Su Pingzi spoke about the most salient point, she's fine, she's just sleeping. He handed the girl over to his wife. Bring her back to her room. Liu hugged her youngest daughter. Then, her eyes roamed across her eldest daughter's figure. Once she was sure there were no injuries, she let out a sigh of relief but stayed her ground. What happened? Tears started to fall from Su Lingyu's eyes. Su Pingzi huffed. He told his wife the whole story. Liu scowled when she heard about the harassment by the evil nobleman. Hearing that Su Lingyan was nearly trampled by the nobleman's horse, she tightened her grip around her youngest daughter. The news about Su Jian getting injured to save her daughters stunned her. When they got to the part where he was brought to the Ministry of Justice, Liu clutched her husband's hand. Her face was pale as she stuttered, "Ninjian he." Su Pingzi patted her hand and said reassuringly, "He's all right. He's out of jail and the case is considered closed for now." Then, Su Pingzi continued saying, "If it weren't for Ninjian, Lingyu and Lingyan would have taken from us. I know he's a bit hot-headed but he has always been good to the family. If it were anyone else, do you think they'll step in and save our daughter? Ever since we took him in, you never liked him. You felt his martial arts lessons cost too much, that he was a burden to the family. You said he always talks back and never listens to you. But did you ever think about how it feels like to be him? To spend 20 years living under another person's roof? Do you think he enjoys it? He's bound to be sensitive. Women are shallow-minded. Pretty words are just words. Actions are what counts." Lingyu was bullied and Ninjian immediately rushed to her defense. "We're lucky nothing bad happened. Will you really be fine if Ninjian never comes back?" Her father's words touched Su Lingyu and another round of tears came flowing down her face. She decided she would spend the rest of her life repaying her brother's kindness. Liu sniffled and lowered her head in shame. The sight of his stern mother crumbling in shame and regret made Su Xinian's heart ached. Despite all the bad names his mother threw at Su Jian Gold Eater, unlucky bastard, his brother still had a spot in her heart. After all, they had lived together for almost 20 years. Su Pingzi glanced at his son and sighed. If your son were there instead, he'd probably be kidnapped by the nobleman. That was uncalled for, Su Xinian thought. After handing Su Lingyan over to the maidservants and comforting Su Lingyu, Liu returned to her part of the manor with a heavy heart. She glanced at the maidservants who were rushing the winter clothing. "Liu, reduce one piece from the Lord and little Nian's wardrobe. When Ninjian returns, take his measurements." Liu was surprised to hear those words. "Have you changed your mind, my lady?" Liu let out a huff. "Am I that cruel of an ant in your mind?" All the maidservants had a collective thought. "Yes, you are." Su Jian left the observatory and hailed a carriage. It took 2 hours to return to the Su manor. He heated up some water for a bath. While checking his body, he found the injury at his waist to be almost healed. He rubbed some golden salve onto the injury and went back to his room. Inside, he rubbed the inkstone and proceeded to write down a few hundred characters of chemistry knowledge. As part of his usual routine, he began writing in his diary. 16 November is a memorable day. I have finally decided to give up my dreams of being an ordinary, boring rich man. I need authority and power. I came up with some plans to achieve this. 1. Change my discipline and join Confucianism. If I can please the 2 Confucian elders, I believe they will fully support my decision. It'll be better than stumbling blindly in my own discipline. Others who cross over use poetry to play dumb where I'm using poetry to barter. Clearly, I'm in a class above. 2. Work hard to get Lady Kwei into my bed. With the support of the principal imperial astronomer, I won't have to break my back to enjoy a good life. 3. Sell the magic item I received to open my heaven's gate. The first idea brings back memories of my high school days. I don't think I'm cut out for studying. Also, I'm almost 20, a bit late for a discipline change. The second idea means I'll have to give up other women. No trips to the playhouse. I think the sacrifice is too much. The third idea, well, entering the Chi rank will not protect me from the Assistant Minister of Revenue. Without relevant connections, it'll be tough to walk down the path of a martial artist. Look at Uncle, he's been stuck at maximum Chi state for nearly 10 years. For now, I'll just hold on tight to my connections in the Imperial Astronomers and the White Deer Academy. I have a feeling the case of the missing tax money is not over yet. As evening came, Su Qian jumped over the wall separating his residence and the Su manor. It was dinner time and he spotted Su Lingyan in the courtyard. She was throwing punches in the air and grunting as she did so. The little girl was dressed in a brown outfit that made her look like a glutinous rice dumpling. Her hair was tied up into a childish bun. Su Qian lightly tipped her balance. "What are you doing?" The little girl lost her footing and fell. Su Lingyan crawled back up and planted her hands on her waist. Her round tummy bulged under the tight robe. "I'm practicing martial arts." Unhappy with her brother's sneak attack, she called out, "Are you challenging me?" After this morning's incident, the 5-year-old must be traumatized. Hence, why she was practicing martial arts. "Why yes, I am," Su Qian said. "Father said, people have to fight till their last breath, martial artists too. It's called diptig. Dignity." "Yes." Su Lingyan nodded earnestly. Then, she squinted her eyes at her brother. "I challenge you to a fight." Her stubby legs went into motion as she charged at Su Qian with fists hurling. Su Qian held her back with one hand on her head. Su Lingyan continued shouting, limbs flailing hysterically to no avail. Her face was scrunched up. Bored with her shenanigans, Su Qian said diplomatically, "I'll give you a drumstick if you surrender." "Sure." Su Lingyan stopped her thrashing and smiled. "Where's your dignity?" "What's dignity?" "Smart." Su Qian held Su Lingyan's hand and entered the hall. Soon, the dishes were served. The table was filled with an abundance of food as if it was a festive dinner. The maidservants intentionally placed the best dishes before Su Qian. He could not resist taking a look at his aunt's expression. She was in a dark-colored, floral-patterned dress. Her delicate countenance and long eyelashes made doe eyes stand out. She was a woman in full bloom. Her demeanor was arrogant as ever, as if Su Qian's actions were insignificant. However, the maidservants would never spoil him without the lady's prior approval. Su Lingyu took small bites of her food as she gathered the courage to speak up. "Brother, mother told the servants to make your winter clothes. Later, I will take your measurements. I wish to make one for you." Su Lingyu was dazzling. She had changed into a dress with lotus flowers embroidery, a yellow shawl with cloud patterns draped over her shoulders. She was only 16 years old, but the outfit and her exquisite facial features made her look timeless. Her brother's silence made Su Lingyu shy. She lowered her head and mumbled, Is that okay? Sisters of this period can make clothes for their brother, amazing. Unlike my cousin in my past life. Su Jian nodded and said, thank you. A smile broke out on Su Lingyu's face and she exchanged a glance with her mother. Su Jian turned away. Uncle, brother, let's retire to the study when we're done with dinner. There's something I want to discuss. Lu Er served the men their cups of tea before leaving the study. Su Jian took a sip of tea. He found himself missing the message-laden food from the future. What do you think of the incident this afternoon? Su Jian broached the topic. Su Pingzi was confused. Isn't it over? Su Zinian frowned. You mean to say Nobleman Zhou will try to exact revenge? It was unlikely the son of the Assistant Minister of Revenue would gracefully accept a defeat by a low-level official. Su Pingzi waved away the notion. No. The White Deer Academy elders and the Imperial astronomers showed up in force today. I don't think the Zhou boy would dare to find trouble with you again. His line of thinking was rational. There were plenty of commoners for the nobleman to pick on, but he chose the Su family. When the imperial courts and politics were involved, one was advised to tread with caution. It was something one heard growing up and the advice was echoed even in the county courts. Su Jian remembered his father telling him to watch out for the high-ranking officials. Su Zinian shook his head. Brother must have his reasons for asking us this. He turned to Su Jian. Su Jian took a breath and said, today, I received news about the missing tax money case from the imperial astronomers. The mastermind behind the crime is Assistant Minister Zhou. Chapter 35. The meeting in the study. The mastermind behind the missing tax money is Assistant Minister Zhou. Su Pingzi slammed his hand down and broke the tea saucer. His eyes were filled with anger as he stood up and his mouth opened to let loose a string of curse words, but something got stuck in his throat. Su Zinian's handsome face was stern as he looked at his impotent father. Is the news reliable? Su Jian nodded. The news came from one of the main investigators, Chu Keiwei of the Imperial Astronomer. He repeated what Chu Keiwei told him. Su Zinian lifted his teacup, then placed it down without drinking. If that's true, then today's incident was premeditated. Jolie was out for revenge. A good brain. Truly a man who passed the imperial examinations. Su Jian was pleased to know that this discussion would not be fruitless. If it was only Su Pingzi, Su Jian would not bother calling a meeting. His uncle's solution would be simple. If we're brothers, come with me and we'll get revenge. As a martial artist, physical violence was Su Pingzi's proficiency. Plotting and strategy were not part of a martial artist's skill set. Su Jian threw out a probing question. What do you think we should do? Su Zinian studied his cousin. With a frown, he answered in an exasperated tone, strike first and gain the upper hand. The slower party will suffer. Su Jian was impressed by Su Zinian's bloodthirsty and decisive strategy. At that, the man of the house decided he could no longer stay silent. He chided his son, keep your preposterous thoughts to yourself. Just because you're a graduate of the Imperial Provincial Examination, you think you can oppose the Assistant Minister of Revenue. Even if you're the top scoring. The man is beyond us. Just as Su Pingzi finished his lecture, his nephew announced his stance. I think brother is right. The person we offended is not Jolie but Zhou Xianping. Although Jolie won't trouble us again, what's to keep the assistant minister from harassing us? Not only did we ruin his master plan, we even injured his heir. There's no way he'll let the case rest. Plus, the Su family is nothing in his eyes. Why would he let us go scot-free? Su Pingzi was not convinced. No, we will not be able to take on Assistant Minister Zhou. Ninjian, you have the Imperial astronomers on your side. Su Zinian is a student of the White Deer Academy. With these two connections, we just have to lay low and stick to our place in society. They shouldn't bother us then. Was that really possible? Su Jian reminded his uncle, perhaps you didn't know, but the imperial astronomers do not interfere with matters of the courts. Su Zinian followed up with his own opinion. During the missing tax silvers case, I was also a student of the White Deer Academy. Brother was released today because Jolie lacked the intelligence and skills to set up a proper trap. If Assistant Minister Zhou decided to drop another death penalty case on our heads, do you think the Imperial Astronomers and the White Deer Academy will go against the law and save us? Su Pingzi's position as the leader of the family was threatened. With his eyebrows knitted together, he said, "But what can we do? He's the Assistant Minister of Revenue, a third-ranked official. I don't know. I'm just a normal guy who crossed over to this world." Su Jian turned to his handsome brother. "Any suggestions?" Su Zinian was silent. Some time passed, and when Su Pingzi looked like he was ready to explode, Su Zinian said, "Something doesn't add up." When the tax silvers went missing, the emperor was understandably furious. It made sense for the punishment to be severe. Didn't the two suspects commit suicide? Su Pingzi asked. Su Zinian ignored his father and continued speaking, "I can think of two possibilities. Either Assistant Minister Zhou has someone of power backing him, or the emperor is aware of some subtle balance to maintain the peace. You said the revenue advisor wrote to impeach Assistant Minister Zhou, but what about the other assistant minister? Or the minister?" Su Jian wondered for a moment. Assistant Minister Zhou's enemies are moving against him. Su Zinian took control of the conversation. "My mentor once said, the emperor's ultimate goal is always balance. If the emperor did not punish Assistant Minister Zhou, there must be some political undercurrent within the courts. Then, what do we do?" Su Pingzi asked. Su Jian rubbed his chin and said, "The emperor might be able to act discreetly during normal times, but inspections are coming. If we can find evidence of wrongdoing, there is a high chance he can be eliminated. The inspections are part of tradition, so the emperor can't dismiss the verdict as he pleases. The dragon-slaying technique the Confucians can employ has its core in customs. Every enemy of Assistant Minister Zhou's will be on the prowl." Su Zinian was surprised to hear the words dragon-slaying technique come from his uncultured cousin's mouth. Is this still the same man I know? Su Jian thought, I think I watched too many period dramas. He had also spent a lot of his time perusing history books in his past life. They were a wealth of information. The books taught him one thing about humankind: humans never learned from their history. At first, Su Jian had snubbed his nose at such a conclusion, but it made good sense. Teachers and parents often encouraged young kids to study and work hard, but few ever took their words seriously. People only realized the truth behind their elders' words after they had grown up and been kicked around by society. After the failed business, Su Jian had advised his younger cousin, who did not like studying, to prioritize his studies, lest he end up regretting like Su Jian. It felt like a déjà vu. Su Zinian lifted his chin and asked, "What does brother think we should do?" "Competitive little brat. I don't think I'll enjoy an arrogant female lead. I'm more partial to a 30-60, flirty madam," Su Jian thought. With a straight face, Su Jian said, "Why did Assistant Minister Zhou plan the fake silver case? It can't be corruption, as there are easier ways to enrich one's coffers. Why risk being caught during the inspections? Unless he urgently needed the silvers to cover up something bigger. Something that could be dug up during the inspections." Su Jian's logical reasoning was working overtime. A grin was forming on Su Zinian's face. "And we should find out the real reason behind Assistant Minister Zhou's plan. Once we know the truth, the Assistant Minister will have no choice but to confess to his crimes," was what Su Jian wanted to say, but Su Zinian's amused expression made him hesitate. Instead, Su Pingzi slapped his thigh and called out in excitement, "We'll expose him. Then he'll have nowhere to hide." The man was ecstatic to have a brilliant idea for once. "I'm not dumb," Su Pingzi thought. Su Zinian sighed. "Father, Do you think an armed guard will be allowed access to the courts to investigate an assistant minister? Or read the Ministry of Revenue's case scrolls? Su Pingzi's expression was solemn. Su Jian stepped in with a knowing voice. Of course not. Appreciate you taking the hit, uncle. Displeased that he was unable to trounce Su Jian in an intellectual battle, Su Zinian carried on asking, then what does brother suggest we do? Su Jian traced his finger along the grooves of the table. We are not the main force acting against Assistant Minister Zhou, but we can be the last straw that breaks the camel's back. Pit the two parties against each other. He did not have a clear picture of the specifics. Impressive, the praise echoed in Su Zinian's mind. If we take one step back and look, we don't have to go after Assistant Minister Zhou. As a third-ranked official, he would have many tricks up his sleeves. But he has a weakness. Su Jian's eyes lit up and he punched out. Zhou. Exactly. Compared to his father, Zhou is a small fry. If the evidence for impeachment was insufficient, let's make up more charges. Zhou Xianping's political enemies will wield the knife as we dig the hole. There was a glimmer of hostility in Su Zinian's bright eyes. With the inspections coming, if Zhou does anything too outrageous and offends the gods and the people, Zhou Xianping will have to answer for his son's crimes. The emperor might have let him off the hooks once, but a second time is not guaranteed. Su Zinian paused, then said with a frown, it is a viable plan, but they are not stupid. Fabricating a criminal charge might not work. The back and forth between the two men made Su Pingzi realize his usefulness in the discussion had reached an end. There was nothing he could contribute. His son's analysis cleared things up in his mind. The more he thought about the plan, the more plausible it seemed. He hit the table and exclaimed, Siju is a genius. And your nephew isn't. Su Jian side-eyed his uncle, then took a swipe at Su Zinian. People say the scholar's idle chatter can bring down the nation. Seems like you're not an exception. Su Zinian smirked and fired back. Please teach me your ways. Su Jian was not perturbed. I don't have any solid plans, but I can share my line of thought. Quick. Share. Su Pingzi exclaimed. A successful candidate of the highest level in imperial examinations. A difficult but impractical skill. Chapter 36. Troublemaker. Su Jian began with his forte. Do you know the process of solving a case? Observe the scene, collect clues, then make daring theories and meticulously comb for evidence. Unravel the mystery piece by piece and obtain the truth. The flickering candlelight illuminated Su Pingzi's dumbfounded expression. Su Zinian was in deep thought. Su Jian carried on his lecture. Don't think about how to trick Zhou. Instead, focus on observing him and have an ear out for any news. Then, with sufficient information, we can hatch a bold plan and hammer out the details and possibilities. The steps were systematic and clearly defined. Su Zinian believed his brother's way of thinking was apt for the situation. Hu Ninjian was also a resourceful and reliable child. Su Pingzi gained some respect for his nephew. Previously, he had thought him too stubborn and unyielding to live a long life. Seeing that no one objected to his plans, Su Jian said, Siju, you're a successful imperial examination candidate and have access to the scholars. Gather information on the court politics and anything and everything about Zhou. Be thorough. Uncle, the Zhou manor is within the inner wall. The armed guards have nightly patrols, so you'll be in a position to surveil the manor. Send someone you trust. I want to know everything about Zhou. Where he went, what he did, and whom he spoke to. The father and son nodded, then realizing a missing piece, they asked, and you? Su Jian gave them a secretive smile. I'll be making a backup plan, just in case. Siju, let's have a talk later, there are some questions I have for you. I'll stay over at your place tonight. Drip, drip. The sound of water droplets echoed through the silent room. Brother, are you asleep? No. Oh. Brother, asleep yet? Brother, you're cutting into my space. Su Jian flinched. Then, he heard Su Zinian continue. Keep your elbows. Okay, okay. The mood was awkward as the sounds of their breathing filled the room. Su Jian asked, can't sleep? Yeah. I'm not used to the sleeping arrangement, Su Zinian replied. Me too. Su Jian said, when was the last time we had a sleepover? Su Zinian took a moment to recall the past. When I was 10. Ever since you started learning martial arts, the relationship between you and mother was strained. We drifted apart then. Here I thought you would deny we ever shared a bed. We can still do this now, but I'll never get to have a sleepover with Lingyu. The host's childhood memory surfaced in his mind. Su Jian sighed. I don't blame your mother. An armed guard doesn't earn a lot. Uncle's annual take-home pay is a little more than 200 silver taels. To spend half of it on me while the rest of you share the remaining half, your mother is right to be angry. Su Zinian diverted the topic. The Su family might be done for if we can't get through this debacle. If Assistant Minister Zhou was not toppled, the Su family would face repercussions after the inspections. I'll arrange for something. If the worst comes to worst, we'll have to leave Jingzhou City. Uncle and I can find labor jobs which will be plenty throughout the lands, but your 10 years of study will go to waste, Su Jian said sympathetically. Su Zinian took a deep breath. Rank and wealth are but mortal constructs. As a true scholar who studies the scriptures and walks the sage's path, these are nothing to me. Su Jian agreed wholeheartedly and said, if Su Zinian wasn't born, Dai Feng would have been in eternal darkness. The thin thread of friendship was severed with that cheeky line. Su Zinian huffed and puffed and curled into a ball, taking away the blanket the brothers were sharing. Hey, Siju, share the blanket. It's winter season and while I'm at maximum refinement, I'm not immune to the cold. Su Zinian stayed in the curled up position and tightened his grip on the blanket. He pretended to be asleep and ignored Su Jian. In Su Lingyu's chamber, the dying embers of the burning coal gave rise to plumes of carbon dioxide smoke. A slit in the windows was opened for ventilation. The eyebrows on Su Lingyu's fair face were knitted together. Then, her eyes opened suddenly. She spent some time staring at the curtains that covered the bed before sitting up. She stretched and the thick blanket fell away. Her white undergarments were stretched to reveal a growing girl's figure. There was an elegant curve to her neck. Her messy hair framed her exquisite countenance. Su Lingyu covered her pink lips as she yawned cutely. The maidservant who slept across the room woke up and quickly got dressed. The room is a little stuffy. Please open the windows, Su Lingyu instructed as she rubbed her forehead. The maidservant hurried to please. The blanket was thrown aside. Su Lingyu walked over to the window and inhaled a breath of fresh air. As the daughter of a martial artist, Su Lingyu was not a finicky lady. Back when her father did martial arts training with Su Jian, Su Lingyu and Su Zinian would join in for fun. The siblings made a pact to train and grow stronger together. However, as time passed, her mother forbade the siblings from joining Su Jian in his martial arts training. By then, their father had decided Su Jian would study the blade while Su Zinian would study the books. A scholar practicing martial arts was regarded as neglecting his studies. A daughter practicing martial arts would find trouble attracting suitors as no man appreciated a muscular lady. As Su Lingyu was enjoying the fresh air, a man passed by her window. He was dressed in the black uniform of a constable. The collar and cuffs were patterned red. Su Lingyu and Su Jian exchanged a second long glance. Then, a warm smile graced Su Jian's face. Su Lingyu let out a yelp and shut the window. My sister is all grown up. Su Jian thought cheerfully. Although I was not the hand that raised her, I still watched her grow up into a lady. She was just a little button then. Honestly, she was appropriately covered, there was no need for such a huge reaction. In her private chamber, Su Lingyu was hunched down as a red blush spread across her face. The maidservant advised the young lady. You should change your habit. Open the windows after you've washed and tidied up. Lucky it's just your brother. What if a stranger saw you? Su Lingyu shuddered at the thought. Stop it. The path outside her window was rarely taken. Su Xinian never took this path and her parents' chamber was not nearby. Opening her windows in the morning was a fairly safe thing to do. Why was he in the inner courtyard? Su Lingyu wondered as she stared into the mirror. The maidservant brushed her hair and helped with her makeup. Once that was done, the maidservant browsed through the jewelry box. My lady, you're short on presentable hair accessories. Su Lingyu answered with a sigh. When the Su family was jailed, all their possessions were taken away. The household expenses including supporting more than a dozen servants were eating away at their coffers. They could not afford jewelry. Treasure House has some nice offerings. I went in to browse yesterday and didn't want to leave. The hairpins would look lovely on you. Comparable, the maidservant said. I think you mean compatible. A flash of longing crossed Su Lingyu's eyes. But it costs so much. 10 silver taels for one piece. Maybe if we solved the riddle in the shop, the owner promised to give a discount to anyone who solves the riddle. Su Lingyu was barely paying attention. Lanner, do you think Big Brother has changed recently? Lanner thought for a moment. Then, she said with a smile, he's gentler and funnier than before. And he's more knowledgeable now. Previously, he always had an angry face and was never this good toward you and your brother. He only smiled when talking to your father. Su Lingyu was satisfied with the answer as a smile bloomed on her face. It wasn't his fault. Mother never treated him well. The thought of their improving sibling relationship put her in a happy mood. Brother used to be aloof and grumpy all the time. Now, he's full of surprises. Su Qian arrived at Su Lingyan's room. The youngest daughter was nowhere near adulthood, so he did not bother to knock when entering. He found the child squatting on the ground, intensely brushing her teeth with the hog bristle toothbrush. Her concentration was fully on the task at hand. The maidservant was tidying up her bed. Su Lingyan looked up and attempted to speak with the suds in her mouth. Who he? Why are you brushing your teeth yourself? Su Qian asked as he glanced at the maidservant. Father said a boy has to be independent to learn martial arts. You know that you're a girl, right? Su Qian questioned. Innocently, the little bean replied, yes. No, you don't. Su Qian asked, do you know the difference between a boy and a girl? No. What's the difference? Su Lingyan said truthfully. Well, a biology lesson would not make things clearer for her. Su Qian recalled the 9 years of formal education and came up with a simple conclusion that would elegantly explain the sexes. Simply put, boys grow up to be troublemakers while girls grow up to be crybabies. Su Lingyan widened her eyes as she digested the words. No wonder mother calls me a troublemaker. She danced around the room, shouting, I'm a troublemaker. A troublemaker. Su Qian silently excused himself from the room and wisely decided to skip the family breakfast. Chapter 37. On learning. Jingzhou City was bustling with activity as the day began. Stalls were set up along the busy streets and Su Qian found warm food in one that was 2 streets away from the Changle County courts. The vendor was a dark-skinned, thin, middle-aged man. He wore a black apron and smiled courteously at every customer. His cooking satisfied Su Qian. The only gripe Su Qian had was the locals' preference for sugar. Sweetened soybean was one thing, but even their soft bean curd was cooked with sugar. Nevertheless, Su Qian was an understanding man. After all, he was in a foreign land. He got the man to hold the sugar and added soy sauce, lard, onion flakes, and minced garlic to his bowl. He also bought 4 breadsticks, 6 meat buns, 2 steamed buns, a bowl of porridge, and 3 side dishes. When he was done, he asked for the bill. "Sir, it is my honor to have you visit my stall. I won't take your payment." The vendor had noted the official uniform Su Qian was wearing. He glanced at the number of empty dishes on Su Qian's table and felt his heart ache. "Are you sure?" The vendor gulped. The food Su Qian ate was at least a 4-person portion. He operated a small business in the city and did not want trouble. Hence, he insisted on covering the official's food bill. "I won't take his money." "I won't." "It's fine. Keep your money. It's on the house." The vendor had obviously gone through a similar experience in the past. "Okay. Let me sit here and digest for a moment. Don't bother me." Su Qian waved away the vendor. The vendor scurried away obediently. The Daifeng dynasty lasted centuries. If corruption isn't weeded out from the government, the people's lives will never improve. Su Qian watched the vendor busy himself with the stall's operation and thought of the pitiful look in his eyes. Even since the ancient times, the common folks' hardships are never taken into account by the people at the top. Su Qian took out 10 copper coins and placed them on the table before leaving. Once he was gone, the vendor came to clear the dishes. What an unlucky day. However, the vendor was shocked to find a stack of copper coins at the table. Not only did the constable pay for the food, he even gave extra. The vendor rushed into the streets, but the man in uniform had disappeared into the crowd. He gasped in confusion as his throat went dry. In all these years, he had never encountered a low-level official who paid for his meals. When the morning roll call was complete, Su Qian went to Magistrate Zhu to ask for a leave of absence. The county magistrate readily agreed. Su Qian returned to the Su manor and entered Su Xinian's chamber. The two brothers nodded knowingly at each other. Su Xinian had prepared an ivory Confucian robe with grey cloud prints. Su Qian noticed the green robe Su Xinian was wearing and asked, "Yours looks much better. Let's switch." Su Xinian chuckled coldly. "You wish." The scholar's robe looked odd on the martial artist. His muscles made parts of the robe bulge awkwardly. A scholar was meant to look graceful with billowing sleeves. The two brothers left the Su manor and spent 3 silver taels on 2 horses. Together, they rode out of Jingzhou city. Their destination took them 60 miles out of the city, up Mount Qingyun, where the famous White Deer Academy was located. The mountain had another name, but it was long since forgotten. Ever since the White Deer Academy was built, a chorus of cultures and worldly ideas filled the area. Thus, the mountain was named Mount Qingyun. They rode their horses hard, and 2 hours later, the mountain appeared beyond the horizon. Su Qian squinted and saw the distant silhouette of the academy building. "Siju, I'm curious." Su Qian had to raise his voice to be heard. He slowed his horse and waited for his cousin to do the same. Their horses went from a gallop to a canter. "Do you think the great sage achieved first rank?" The disciplines and paths of this world fascinated him, but he could never get a hold of a complete guide. Su Xinian lifted his chin and said, "You think I can answer that? Just say you can't then." Quit it with the snobbish looks. Su Qian rolled his eyes and asked, "Do you know how long he lived?" He nodded. 82 good years. The great sage who founded Confucianism first rank or not only lived till 82. 82 years was considered a long life for the ancient period, but this world had magical properties. Even a sage could not escape mortality. Okay, I shouldn't generalize. There are still many things I don't know about. The White Deer Academy doesn't allow visitors. It's a rule even my mentor can't disobey. Are you sure about this? Su Xinian asked. Su Qian shook his head. It's all a matter of effort. They have decided to send the women of their family to the White Deer Academy before they rolled out any plans. That way, if a tragedy befalls them, the academy would shield them from the Zhou family's wrath. The missing tax money case nearly put me in a casket. If this plan falls through, it'll be the end of our family bloodline. Su Jian spurred his horse into a gallop, leaving Su Xinian behind in a trail of dust. Unwilling to lag behind, Su Xinian flicked the whip and raced his cousin. Mount Qingyun was not a particularly majestic mountain. If not for the White Deer Academy, it would just be an ordinary mountain in a sea of mountains. There were courtyards, lofts, plazas, and waterfalls. The stone steps ran through the mountain to connect each part of the academy. In one of the lofts, one side of the walls was not erected for the second floor. From the corridors, one could see the rolling plains and the mountain ranges. The great chess player who had sworn off chess Li Muibai stood in the corridor with a scroll in hand. Behind him, two friends were in a heated debate. I mistakenly moved this. I want a redo. What's done is done. The sage once said a mistake rectified is the greatest deed. Did the sage mean a chess move? Does it not apply? Scoundrel! You wish to debate the words of the scriptures with me? Fine, only one of us will leave here alive. Bring it on. Li Muibai shook his head. Blundering fools. The two men behind him were the military strategist, Zhang Zhen, and another black-robed elder with a long beard that grazed his chest. He was one of the White Deer Academy's 4 great Confucian elders, Chen Tai courtesy name, Yuping. Each elder had their own specialty. Li Muibai was a chess master, Zhang Zhen was an expert in military stratagems, Yang Gong who had left for Qingzhou was focused on scholarly research, while Chen Tai specialized in governance. The Art of Governance, written by Chen Tai, was a highly coveted book among the courts of Daifeng. Li Muibai abandoned the scenery and went inside. He interrupted the ongoing argument by saying, "Where's the headmaster? The crown princess is here. He's entertaining her," Zhang Zhen said absent-mindedly as he stared at the chessboard. "Oh." Li Muibai nodded. Chen Tai said, 3 months until the spring imperial provincial exam, yet our students are losing motivation. Yesterday, while making the rounds, I barely saw any candlelight in the dormitories. The few candlelights I saw were illuminating chessboards. These trifling games ruin ambitions. As Chen Tai spoke, he swiped at the chessboard before him. "You shameless old man. A sore loser like Li Muibai." Zhang Zhen was furious. "A trifling game when you're losing, an honorable test of wits when you're winning." Li Muibai retorted, "Keep my name out of it." At that, the 3 Confucian elders fell silent. The White Deer Academy students had a tough road ahead of them. Even if they passed the imperial examinations, there was a low chance they would be granted a seat in the courts. The most they could look forward to was an official position in some backwater or border town. The disappointing prospects greatly diminished the students' motivation to study for the imperial examinations. The silence in the room was broken by Zhang Zhen. "We must rejuvenate our fellow students." Chen Tai's expression darkened. "We must stand firm and bear this burden. The White Deer Academy should never lose its bid for court appointments." Li Muibai said, "Let's encourage them to study. We mustn't let the academy down." Zhang Zhen rolled a chess piece between his fingers as he said, "The headmaster lectures them every year without fail. We won't see a significant boost in morale." Chen Tai stroked his long beard and frowned. "A new way to motivate them then? Make them recognize the importance of the imperial exams. How about an essay?" Li Muibai shook his head. "A thankless effort, unpopular with the students." "Poetry it is." Zhang Zhen took a sip of tea and said, "Poetry has touched many hearts through the centuries. A well-written poem can motivate them better than a lecture." The problem was Daifeng was suffering from a deficiency of poetry talents. The 3 Confucian elders exchanged glances and collectively shook their heads. Qingyun can be directly translated to pure clouds. Chapter 38. A poem is born. If Ziqian had not left for Qingzhou, this would have been his duty, said Zhang Zhen. He's the best poet among us. Chen Tai's long beard swayed as a cold wind blew into the room. Brother Jinyan is more fit for the courts than myself. Are you accusing me of passing the buck? Zhang Zhen quickly followed up with a challenge. Well, I can't wait to hear your poem. I'll be sure to have my ears wide open. As an argument was about to break out, a student of Zhang Zhen's entered the room. He greeted them with a bow before saying, Su Siju is here. Su Siju? Why is he here? Has he finished copying the sage's quote? Zhang Zhen nodded. Bring him in. The student nodded and left. Zhang Zhen stared across the chessboard at Chen Tai and smiled. Speaking of which, I recently took in a new student, Su Siju's cousin. He's an incredibly talented poet. Li Mubai immediately spoke up, he's also my student. Chen Tai looked between the two elders. Realization dawned on him. The man who wrote the line, "Fear not a journey of loneliness, for you are not a stranger to the realm." Li Mubai and Zhang Zhen grinned. Chen Tai let out a howling laugh as he wagged his finger at the two elders. What are you laughing at? Chen Tai held back his laughter and mocked, I'm laughing at the fact that you're both blinded by fame and jealousy. Yang Ziqian's name will live on in the poem, but you two should stop daydreaming. Beautiful poems are few and far between. Not every poem will end up in the history books. That epic poem probably took up all his talent. And now you expect him to come up with two more masterpieces so your names will be remembered? Has the noble spirit in you been swallowed up by greed? Li Mubai and Zhang Zhen were silent. They knew Chen Tai was right about the scarcity of good poems. The man was not even a scholar, and the creation of the farewell poem could have just been a coincidence. To pin their hopes of being written into the history books on some low-level constable was a tad ridiculous. Yuping is right. As a scholar, we should be humble. For our names to be written into history, we should walk the proper path instead of seeking shortcuts. We have strayed from the teachings. The two elders folded their hands and bowed before Chen Tai. To have a mistake rectified is the greatest deed, Chen Tai intoned as he nodded. Moments later, Zhang Zhen's student came back with Su Jian and Su Zinian in tow. The two brothers greeted the room. We're here to see the teachers. Li Mubai and Zhang Zhen exchanged a glance. The arrival of Su Jian was unexpected but welcomed. Sit, Zhang Zhen said. Ninjian, you came. Is it because inspiration has struck you again? Li Mubai probed. Su Jian shook his head and said, I'm here to ask for a favor. Su Jian told the two elders about the request but hid the fact that it was part of a revenge plot against the Assistant Minister of Revenue. He did however mention Assistant Minister Zhou could be the mastermind of the missing tax silvers, and once the inspections were over, it was highly likely that he would punish the Su family. This Li Mubai looked over to Zhang Zhen, who was equally as concerned. The academy doesn't allow outsiders to stay over, it's the rule. Rules were important to scholars. Before Su Jian could argue, Su Zinian spoke up, the crown princess often stays over in the academy too. Zhang Zhen shook his head. She's the crown princess. Su Zinian nodded. So the academy's rule applies to everyone but the emperor's kin. This young man hasn't learned anything about tactfulness. The three elders in the room laughed. Su Jian withheld his giggle. His brother's tongue was as sharp as ever. Li Mubai shook his head and said, Brother Jinyan, I can't wait for your student to enter the Fate Weaver rank. That's a horrifying thought. Zhang Zhen's lips twitched. Chen Tai was the only person beaming. He looked at Su Jian and said, You are Su Ninjian. Yes. The man who was undercover as a scholar folded his hands in greeting. I hear you're a great poet. How about this? If you can come up with a poem that impresses all three elders in this room, I'll allow the women to seek refuge in the academy and personally safeguard them. Staying in the academy was one thing, but more importantly, the elder was promising their safety. That was the real reason why the Su brothers came to the White Deer Academy. A glimmer of hope appeared on Su Zinian's face. He turned to Su Qian and uttered, "Brother." He was elated but also nervous. Writing poetry was not difficult, every scholar could string words into a rhyme or stanza. The difficult part was impressing the elders. Was it really that difficult? Yes. Yes, it was. Poetry? You're asking me to give you poems for free. Su Qian did not immediately agree. Instead, he asked, any themes? Or do I get to choose? The three elders eyed each other. Zhang Zhen said, the theme is learning. Of course they have something in mind. Else, I could just randomly pick one from my memory, Su Qian sighed in his heart. Despite that, he was relieved as the theme was still within his scope of knowledge. He was reminded of the text he studied in high school titled, On Learning. However, being an essay, it did not fulfill the criteria. Through books, you will find grand houses and graceful ladies. The proverb came from a famous poem that survived the centuries. It was known to be one of the essential readings when it came to the theme, learning. Just as he was going to present the poem, he suddenly remembered the precarious position the White Deer Academy was in since 200 years ago. If I remembered correctly, this poem was written by the emperor during the Song dynasty. It mainly spoke about the merits and successes that came with studying, but the White Deer Academy students have been ostracized by the courts. When Siju passed his exams, he was worrying about which remote town he would be sent to. This poem would be a slap to the face for the academy students. The prolonged silence from Su Qian worried Su Zinian. Zhang Zhen and Li Mubai stared expectantly at Su Qian while Chen Tai sipped his tea, an amused smile on his face. Then, Su Qian stirred from his thoughts. He folded his hands and said, forgive my dullness. Siju, please ready the ink. Su Zinian placed the brush, ink, and paper on the table. He prepared a fresh batch of ink and dipped the brush, staining the bristles black. Pulling his sleeve up, he angled the brush, gesturing for Su Qian to accept it. I better not humiliate myself with my horrible calligraphy skills. The turmoil in his heart was not shown on his face. Su Qian struck a pose, looking like a scholar rousing the mountains with his words. Siju, be my brush. Su Zinian nodded obediently and sat down before the table. The candlelight burns from midnight to morn. That's when scholars should study the most. When young, we neglect studies for fun. When old, we regret not learning enough. Su Zinian finished writing and put down the brush. He stared at the neatly written 7-character quatrain and felt a pang of emotions in his heart. Silence filled the room. Su Zinian could feel the lingering sadness of the poem. The three Confucian elders walked over to the table and stared at the end product. They studied the words in silence. The long-bearded elder in black robes found his eyes prickling with tears. Courtesy name of Yang Gong. Courtesy name of Zhang Zhen. Chapter 39. Su Pingzi, that unfit father. What an excellent poem. Ninjian truly is the poet of the century. Li Mubai clapped his hand loudly. The excitement written on his face was befitting a scholar who came across a masterpiece. There was also a hint of eagerness to see how the academy students would react. Zhang Zhen said nothing, but he gave Su Qian a look of content admiration as if he was the one who groomed such an impressive student. The words are simple, yet they carry so much meaning. The candlelight burns from midnight to morn. That's when scholars should study the most. Brother Jinyan, do you still remember our academy days? Said Chen Tai. He found the poem to be profound. Zhang Zhen thought back to his younger years and said, our time in the academy? I was a poor student then and only had 2 steamed buns to eat every day. At night, my stomach would growl as I struggled to hold the candlelight over the book. Was that why you always stole my eggs? Li Mubai said in a jovial tone. Hey, I was borrowing. Didn't I return them to you later on? Zhang Zhen retorted. Li Mubai blew his mustache and said, an egg is worth so much more to a poor man. Chen Tai coughed to break up the argument between the two friends. He turned to Su Zinian and said, Siju, after the spring imperial provincial exams, you will be qualified for an official post regardless of your results. Have you given thought to the future? The sudden topic change threw everyone off. Zhang Zhen and Li Mubai quieted down as they thought of Su Zinian's future. Chen Tai glanced at the two hesitant elders and quickly said, typically, one would begin in the city, then be sent out to govern other towns. That's the standard way to climb the ranks. Although I'm not a court official, I know people in the courts who could help. Su Zinian's mentor was happy to hear that. That sounds great. Siju, quick show your appreciation. No need for that. But I wouldn't mind a favor, Chen Tai said with a smile. His words made the two elders raise their eyebrows. Something was not right. No one said anything about a favor. Chen Tai's eyes were crinkled into half-moons. Ninjian, you're an unpolished gem. To stand out, you need someone to work on you. These two elders aren't the best at mentoring. Why don't you come with me? Li Mubai and Zhang Zhen were livid. Go away, you shameless bastard. Su Jian took the opportunity to speak. I do have some questions for the elder. His visit to the White Deer Academy was calculated. He wished to gain some free service. I'm stuck in the martial artist's refinement stage. As I have no achievements and my family is poor, I never had the chance to enter the Qi rank. He made a 90-degree bow and said, please help me open my heaven's gate. This was his second reason for the visit. Although he could sell the magic items from Songqing, he figured there would be a better way. He simply did not wish to waste the magic items. He wanted a win-win situation. Zhang Zhen shook his head and chuckled. Are you crazy? Everyone here is on the path of Confucianism. We can't open your heaven's gate. How the qi moves in a martial artist's body is only known by those who walk the same path. The divide among the disciplines is wider than I'd expected. Su Jian was somewhat disappointed when he asked, I don't understand. If the Heaven's Gate requires a divine class expert to unlock, how did the first martial artist open his Heaven's Gate? Li Mubai lifted his teacup and answered him with another question, do you think the martial arts discipline was founded by a person? That he ascended the ranks effortlessly? Su Jian shook his head. The discipline is advanced by generations after generations, Li Mubai explained. Perhaps at the beginning, the refinement rank was the highest one could achieve. As fate would have it, someone's heaven's gate was opened and the qi training state became the peak. As centuries passed, we have the current, fully developed martial arts discipline. Fate. Su Jian latched onto the important detail. Having a divine class expert open one's heaven's gate is the safest and most convenient method, but it's not the only method. Chen Tai took over the explanation. He smiled as he continued. When a baby is born, he is enveloped by a pure qi. As he grows older, the heaven's gate closes and the qi retreats into the body. To master the qi, one has to reopen the heaven's gate. Su Jian nodded. As humans consume all forms of mortal sustenance, the heaven's gate is clogged by impurity and thus, the qi circulation is cut off. His uncle had taught him the basic theory. Besides the widely known, there are two other methods to open the heaven's gate. First, the expel infuse method. It has to be practiced since young. Every day, one must bathe in a herbal bath to cleanse the meridians that lead to the heaven's gate. The method is time and resource intensive, thus eliminated from practice. The second method is to use an external force. This is the oldest and dumbest method used by our forebears. They swallowed monster pills. Monster pills are essence collected from monsters. With the energy accumulated in one's body, taking the pill will force open the 8 extraordinary meridians, but the effect is uncontrollable. Only 1 out of 10 survive. I see. While I didn't get what I wanted, some additional knowledge never hurt. Su Jian was grateful for the explanation. Thank you for the enlightenment. Look at this polite and humble student. A good talker too. The three Confucian elders wore satisfied smiles as they stroked their beards. At the heart of the academy was the sage's study palace, also known as the sage's temple. It was a place to enshrine and worship the founder of Confucianism. The plaza outside the sage's study palace could fit all of the White Deer Academy students. Every year, the headmaster would address the student body when the spring imperial provincial exams rolled by. He would urge them to study hard, get their names on the scoreboard and contribute to the greater good of society. On the plaza, there was a mottled, red wall that had layers of papers stuck to it. It was the academy's bulletin board. The mentors would paste their essays, poems, calligraphy, and occasionally their students' outstanding work. Two students appeared before the wall. One was carrying the rolled-up paper while the other was applying paste to the wall. Then, the two worked together to unveil the new piece that was to be featured on the wall. The scene attracted the other students in the area. The size of the paper, a human's height, astounded them. "What's being featured? Come on, let's have a look. Doesn't look like an essay." "Oh, a poem. Why the fuss over a poem?" Ever since Xiang's layman left the academy, the poems on the wall are rarely worth a read. The remaining mentors and elders aren't good at poetry. As the chatter picked up, students flocked to the wall to check out the huge poster. The characters were written boldly. The brush had been gripped by a firm hand. The ink had seeped through the paper. Each stroke conveyed the gravity of the poet's words. "This is Mentor Zhang's writing." A student recognized the handwriting. Others were focused on the content. "The candlelight burns from midnight to morn. That's when scholars should study the most. Oh my! Ever since the autumn exams, I never stayed up to study." The words used in the poem are simple, yet it is thought-provoking. Simple. When young, we neglect studies for fun. When old, we regret not learning enough. The lesson is embedded within the poem. It is a worthy proverb. When old, we regret not learning enough. I've been falling behind on my studies. Spent too much time playing chess and exploring the mountains. This poem is a wake-up call to me. Whose mighty hand penned such a good poem? More people gathered before the wall to check out the poem. Many resonated with the words and left feeling motivated to study. The first half made the students blush with shame. Who could pull an all-nighter studying? Such examples were littered across the academy grounds. The academy elders often spoke about their long study sessions decades ago when they were students. The few outstanding students also spent an inordinate amount of time studying. However, it was the second half of the poem that made the students sweat. When young, we neglect studies for fun. When old, we regret not learning enough. The words echoed like a warning. The students who had been slacking were remorseful. They were overcome with anxiety as they worried about their future. Deep in their bellies, a fire was lit and their motivation for study rejuvenated. A short distance away, the three Confucian elders observed the scene from the edge of the plaza. Chen Tai stroked his beard and laughed. "I take back my words. The poem has touched many hearts. Su Ningjian truly is the poet of the century." Witnessing the effects of the poem on the student body, Zhang Zhen beamed. "You're right. He produced that poem before we even finished a pot of tea. His poetry skill and talent can outclass even the best poets in history." Suddenly, Li Mubai fielded a question: "Do you believe that he abandoned his studies?" The two elders nodded. Li Mubai smiled and asked, "How are you sure?" Zhang Zhen replied, "When crafting the poem, he told Siju to write in his stead. As a scholar, why would you ask others to write in your stead? Unless he isn't proficient in calligraphy." Chen Tai added. Calligraphy was the basic skill needed by every student. Li Mubai sighed. "It's unfortunate that he's beyond the age of changing paths." Chen Tai's heart ached. Such talent wasted on martial arts. An affront to the gods. The rough practice of martial arts was not suited for a man with such flowery words. Something crossed Zhang Zhen's mind. I heard Siju mention when the two boys were young, his father decided Siju would study while Ninjian would learn martial arts. Su Pingzi is unfit to be a father. He wasted a good scholar. Upsetting, exasperating. Li Beimu said in frustration. The two elders agreed with his condemnation. Chapter 40. A fight. Li Beimu stared at the bulletin wall. More and more students gathered around the wall and even some mentors came to check what the fuss was. After reading the poem, the mentors slapped their thighs, too taken by the words. They lauded the work's simplicity and wisdom. Li Beimu's sharp ears picked up an ongoing conversation. First, we had a fear not a journey of loneliness, and now, this poem on learning. Is there a breakthrough in Daifeng's poetry scene? In the past 200 years, good poems were few and far between. Now, we have two great poems. At least our generation of scholars can proudly face the next generation. Compared to the previous poem, I believe this one will have better longevity. It will be frequently used to motivate scholars. Why is there no author? Which Confucian scholar wrote this? No author, better longevity. Li Muibai's heart drummed excitedly. While his two best friends were occupied, he stealthily made his retreat. Brother Chunjing. Zhang Zhen looked around and realized the man was gone. He was still here. Chen Tai scanned his surroundings. Then, he pointed in the direction of the wall. There. Zhang Zhen turned around and saw Li Muibai dispersing the students. He made it to the wall and took up a brush. Zhang Zhen and Chen Tai focused their attention on the wall. Their pupils deepened and details 100 meters away appeared crystal clear. Besides the poem title on learning, Li Muibai had written a single line of words. Between the 37th and the 38th year, this poem was inspired by mentor Muibai's encouragement to study. It basically meant Li Muibai was the source of inspiration. The two elders were shocked. Shameless old man. Put down that brush. There was a private chamber at the back of the academy. It was built against the mountainside. To the east was a 6-layer waterfall, to the west was an evergreen bamboo forest. Bamboos in the north were a rare sight. It was difficult to cultivate and propagate them. Only in the south could one witness the phenomenon of bamboo shoots growing from the ground after a stormy night. The academy mentors had transplanted the bamboo plants and laboriously cared for them. It took 50 years of cultivation to achieve this lush bamboo forest. Scholars were very much taken by bamboos. They praised the plant's strength of character and likened it to humans. The White Deer Academy headmaster had entered the room one day and saw the vibrant bamboo forest, unyielding to the seasons. They are a representation of myself. This shall be my abode. Everyone, please leave. That was how the room became the headmaster's private chamber. Within the elegantly designed tea room sat an old man in a hemp robe and a woman in a lavish dress. They were enjoying tea together. Outside the room, a row of armored soldiers was on guard. The old man's unkempt white hair cascaded freely down his back. The laugh lines and frown lines on his face were deep when he smiled, the eye wrinkles had the other two beat. Based on only appearance, it was hard to believe the weathered old man was the White Deer Academy's headmaster. The Confucian leader of this era. The woman sitting across him was past her teens, but her hair was tied into a straightforward spiral bun. A dazzling ornament held up the hairstyle. The styling was a sign of an unmarried woman. She wore an ivory dress with exquisite embroidery patterns. The ends of her dress swept the floor. The woman was fresh-faced and beautiful like an untainted lotus flower. Her clear eyes were cool as ice, showcasing the aristocratic aloofness. No longer a child, the curves of her body stood out. The crown princess's voice sounded, light as a chime, "We've not met in half a year. The silvers in your hair have grown in abundance." The headmaster smiled as he sipped his tea. Lines of frustration, they are. Along the way, I heard some scholars fear not a journey of loneliness, for you are not a stranger to the realm. The crown princess's eyes flickered with emotions. It is such an amazing piece. I really loved it. I wonder which Confucian scholar wrote it? Zhao Xiao shook his head and smiled. Why are you mocking me? It is not you that I mock. I'm laughing at the fact that all the talents in White Deer Academy could not compete with a person's random ramblings. Daifeng's scholars are too rigid in their thinking. Traditional and soulless. Poetry requires the soul to be open. This you worry me, headmaster. The crown princess had a serene expression as her slender fingers lifted the teacup. She sipped her tea elegantly as a lady of the imperial family would. Zhao Xiao sighed and said, the poet isn't a scholar but a low-level official in Changle County. The crown princess's face twitched. Daifeng's crown princess was different from other women. Daughters of nobility often took up a musical instrument, learned some chess, studied some books, and did art that was sufficient for that time and age. Shirking off traditions, the crown princess had picked up chess from Wei Yuan, learned the art of war with Zhang Zhen, and studied governance under Chen Tai. She could dictate Confucius's scripture and her policy essays were on par with the scholars in the Imperial College. She was an erudite, through and through. When she was 18, the emperor allowed her to join the bookmaking process in Hanlin Academy. However, last year, the crown princess tried to rewrite the history books and was ousted by the officials. Will you not consider taking up an official position? The crown princess's eyes were sincere as her tone was serious. Confucianism prioritizes the people. Why would you waste the little years you have left? Few people knew that King's Hu's provincial administration commissioner position was initially awarded to Zhao Xiao. However, he refused the position and wrote a recommendation to the courts to select Xiang's layman. I wouldn't mind wasting my years if my students have a path to knowledge. Zhao Xiao sighed. Unfortunately, even after more than a dozen years of hard work, we're still unable to cross this moat set by the second sage. You hold on too much to the past. There's no need for that. The crown princess casually refilled her tea. The emperor awarded you the position in hopes to re-establish the White Deer Academy's presence in the imperial courts. For the future of your students, you shouldn't reject the offer. Zhao Xiao chuckled. Losing control of Wei Yuan? Or are the reds and purples dragon-slaying techniques improving? The crown princess uttered each word from the depths of her heart. It's for the common folk of Daifeng, for the people of the realm. Zhao Xiao had a sardonic smile. The crown princess sighed. As she spoke, her tone changed. After the Battle of Shanhai Pass, Daifeng has been weakening. The frequency of disasters increases every year. Countless sinecures. And widespread corruption among the courts. The gentlemen in courts only care about their political feud. Many prattle nonsense while few actually pull their weight. Headmaster, the empire needs a tailor. Before Zhao Xiao could say a word, the crown princess continued. 3 years ago, the northern barbarians violated the treaty and crossed our borders multiple times, threatening our people. The southern barbarians destroyed the horse roads and ambushed our guarded towns, intending to claim the land as theirs. The western Zhou kingdom has been eyeing for an opportunity to spread Buddhism through the central plains. At that point, her voice was louder and strained. Headmaster, as a man of culture, shouldn't you be doing your part to defend and protect the empire? Zhao Xiao stared at the crown princess. Then, his eyes drifted away from the beautiful and arrogant face to gaze at the bamboo forest. He shook his head and sighed. It's not that I don't want to, but the time is not right. Please, take your leave, your highness. The disappointment in the crown princess's eyes was evident. Just as she was about to bid farewell, the sounds of running footsteps came from outside the private chamber. One of the mentors entered and said, panting, Headmaster, Li Mubai, Zhang Zhen and Chen Tai are fighting. The man who left the White Deer Academy and founded the Imperial College. The high-ranking officials. A position requiring little or no work but giving the holder status or financial benefit. Chapter 41. 41A Minor Officials Poetry _1. The three great Confucians of the Academy were fighting? Was it because he had broken through the limit of the discussion of Dao, and a gentleman's verbal attack had upgraded to a physical attack? The eldest princess was shocked. She had once studied at Yunlu Academy for a period of time. The four great Confucians of the Academy often sat down and talked about Taoism. They laughed when they were happy, and they would also curse without caring about their image when they were anxious. However, they had never encountered a situation where they fought. After all, a great scholar had a noble status and was a teacher. How could he act so easily? Zhao Xiao frowned. He put down his cup and asked, "Why did you attack?" The old man shook his head and said helplessly, "I don't know." Mr. Mu Bai was inscribing something when two of them suddenly appeared out of nowhere and started fighting. After a pause, the old man added with a worried expression, "You called him an old man and he called him a shameless old thief. It looks like he's really angry." This time, even the director, who was as calm as a mountain, was shocked and realized that something was wrong. "I'll go with you, headmaster," the eldest princess said. "The Saints' Academy is within 10 feet of me," Zhao Xiao said in a deep voice. The eldest princess's eyes went blank for a moment, and then she saw the statue of a saint holding a scroll. The candles were burning, and the hall was filled with smoke. There was an uproar outside the hall. A strong wind rushed into the hall and blew out the candles. Director Zhao Xiao had already disappeared from the table. The eldest princess walked towards the palace door against the wind. The strong wind blew her dress backward, and her lapels stuck to her chest. Even the thick winter clothes could not hide her curvaceous figure. Looking into the distance, three great Confucians were standing in the air. The three of them emitted a vast and majestic aura. Their unyielding auras collided with each other, stirring up a gale in the air. Zhang Shen snorted. "Li Mubai, you shameless person. It's fine that you snatched my student that day, but you actually did such a despicable thing today. Have you read all the knowledge of a saint into a dog's stomach?" The eldest princess's expression changed slightly. She didn't know what Li Mubai had done to make Grand Scholar Zhang Shen so angry. Competing for students. The two of them had fought over students before. Li Mubai loudly retorted, "As a teacher, what's wrong with helping your disciple polish the essay and poems? You're the one who's jealous of my talent." "Shut up, I can't stand it anymore," Chen Tai said. Li Mubai glanced at him. "That Zhang guy has his reasons for being angry at me. What does this have to do with you, Chen Tai? Step aside." At this time, Zhang Shen took out a book from his arms and said slowly, "It seems like it's hard to determine who's better when it comes to righteousness." He tore off one of the pages and burned it. The moment the paper was burned to ashes, a green cloud appeared out of nowhere and rushed towards Li Mubai. They were green beetles with hideous mouths, like a dense swarm of locusts. This old man's previous years of traveling the world weren't without any gains. Li Mubai didn't panic. He also took out a book, tore off 2 pages, and ignited them. One of the pages was burned to ashes, turning into a red lizard that was in between reality and illusion. The red lizard's cheeks bulged, and it suddenly spewed out a flame that was dozens of feet long, burning the green clouds into ashes. At the same time, the other page finished burning and transformed into a scantily dressed young lady. Her figure was as light as a fish as she swam towards Zhang Shen. In the process of approaching, Zhang Daru's eyelids felt heavy, and he was overwhelmed by an irresistible sleepiness. The corner of the young lady's mouth raised slightly, and she approached Zhang Shen with a charming smile. At this moment, Chen Tai also burned a piece of paper in his hand. A bright golden core appeared and emitted golden light. "Aya!" Li Mubai was stabbed in the back in vain and staggered from the golden light. Zhang Shen also felt the burning of his golden core and broke free from his sleepiness. He hurriedly circulated his righteous qi and scattered the young lady in revealing clothes. The eldest princess looked at the scene in silence. A sixth-stage scholar could learn the ultimate techniques of other systems, put them into writing, and record them in books. Just now, Zhang Shen had used the methods of a Gu master, and the young lady on Li Mu's paper should be of the wizard system. However, she wasn't too sure what rank it was. As for what Chen Tai had used, if she was not wrong, it was the golden core of the Dao section. The three great Confucians were fighting in midair like a raging fire, and the students were watching with great interest from below. Although they were a little bewildered and worried about the three elders suddenly fighting, it was a rare sight to see great Confucians fighting. Seeing that he was unable to take down Li Mubai, Zhang Shen had an idea. Li Mubai, your pants fell. Li Mubai felt a chill down his spine. He was stunned to find that his pants had already slipped to his ankles. Damn it! Li Mubai's heart exploded as he roared, everyone's pants will drop. Below, countless people bent over in fear to pull up their pants. A milky white jade pendant on the eldest princess's waist lit up. A majestic voice rang out, clearly reaching everyone's ears. This place forbids fellow disciples from killing each other. Floating is forbidden in this place. Get down here. As soon as his voice fell, the surging righteousness of the three great Confucians automatically dissipated. Newton regained his face and pulled them down from the air. Zhao Xiao, who was wearing a linen robe and had messy white hair, walked to the three of them with a dark face. He looked at them sharply. What's going on? Zhang Shen and Li Mubai silently exchanged glances and instantly reached a tacit understanding. The former coldly snorted. It's nothing. There's just a difference in opinion on governance, and no one can convince the other. So, we changed our method, the latter said. Convincing others with reason was in line with the style of the Confucians. Director, I'm reporting them. They're lying to you. All of a sudden, the great scholar Chen Tai stabbed two people in the back, completing a double kill. Zhang Shen and Li Mubai both turned their heads and glared at each other. Director, do you know the poem The Sheep Pavilion Sends Yang Qian to Qingzhou? Chen Tai asked as he looked in the direction of the low wall. Zhao Xiao looked at the low wall and stared at it for a moment. When he saw the line of small words, he immediately understood. He knew that Zhang Jinyan and Li Chunjing had been envious of Layman Purple Sunday. The poem on the short wall was indeed a good poem. Not only would it become famous after it was spread, but it would also have a great chance of being passed down to the future generations. It was excusable for them to argue over their reputation. Wait, what did they mean by hiding it from me just now? Director Zhao's face twitched. Just as he was about to speak, he saw from the corner of his eye that the eldest princess, who was wearing a long dress and had a cold and elegant temperament, was slowly walking over. He immediately swallowed the words he wanted to say. The eldest princess's clear and beautiful eyes flickered as she smiled reservedly. What poem did the two great scholars have a conflict with? Zhang Shen and Li Mubai hurriedly bowed. It's just a poem to encourage learning. The eldest princess's eyes turned to the low wall, and her beautiful eyes brightened. Good poem. Who composed this poem? He asked. Zhang Shen bit the bullet and said, he's my student. Yes, The Sheep Pavilion Sends Yang Qian to Qingzhou was also written by him. The fast-handed person from the Chang'an County government. The eldest princess's eyes flashed with surprise. His name is Su Qian, Li Mubai replied, he's also my disciple. The eldest princess felt that this name was familiar. It was as if she had heard someone mention this name before, but she did not remember it in her heart, so she could not remember. It's too much of a waste for such a great talent to be a fast hand in the Chang'an County magistrate. Even if he only knows how to compose poems, it's enough for me to raise him in my residence and make him an advisor, the eldest princess thought to herself. The students of the academy stood in the distance, admiring the eldest princess's beautiful face. She was as beautiful as an independent snow lotus, and her noble aura made people forget the common customs. Where is he? The eldest princess's clear eyes swept over the crowd and gazed at them. He went on a mountain tour. Chen Tai said. All the students who heard their conversation fell into a great shock for a moment. They finally knew who had written this encouraging poem. Chapter 42. 42 The Quasi-Sage and His Wife. 1. The cold wind swept through the forest, and the dead branches wailed mournfully. Su Qian looked at Su Nian, whose clothes and black hair were dancing in the wind, on the stone-paved path. His cousin, who was so good-looking that it made people jealous, looked like a fairy who had descended to the mortal world. He pointed to a waterfall in the distance and introduced, "This is the place where a senior of the academy comprehended the Tao. There is a stone tablet by the waterfall, which records the life of that senior. There was a lack of water in the winter, so the waterfall was thin and weak. It rushed into the pool listlessly, and the water was so clear that one could see the bottom. There was a stone tablet beside the pond, and a bronze man was sitting cross-legged in meditation. The stone tablet was inscribed with the life story of a scholar named Qianzhong. This person was born 600 years ago, and he was active during the founding of the Dafeng dynasty. At that time, the king of the previous dynasty was muddle-headed, the officials were corrupt, the tyrants preyed on the people, and the central plains was filled with smoke and rebel armies. At that time, the imperial court, Great Zhou, and the rebel armies were engaged in a tug-of-war that lasted for more than 10 years. The people living at the bottom of the society were extremely poor. Qianzhong, a second-grade Great Confucian, had been traveling for 3 years and had witnessed the people's miserable lives. He was filled with anger and brought the people's grievances to the capital of Great Zhou, using his body to destroy the few national fortunes of Great Zhou. After that, Dafeng established a country, quelled the chaos, and the 4 seas were peaceful. Is the Great Confucian realm that powerful? Why don't I see the word awesome on the 3 great scholars? Su Qian asked doubtfully. Su Nian didn't know what awesome meant, but it was undoubtedly a vulgar word. Thinking of his brother's poem, he couldn't help but mock him and replied. Who told you that teacher and the others are second-stage Great Confucians? They are only 4th-stage gentlemen. What? Su Qian was in disbelief. How can you still call yourself a great scholar? Su Nian squatted down by the pond, washed his hands, and explained, there are 2 meanings to a great scholar. One is a scholar with deep knowledge and a reputation, the other was a rank 2 that specifically referred to the Confucian path. The great scholar of our academy belongs to the former. Destroying a country's fate with the grievances of the people, even if the fate of the dynasty was weak at the end of the year, was still not something that could be done by human strength. Just how strong was a rank 2 in the way of Confucius? What about rank 1? Su Qian fell into deep thought. After a long time, he said in a respectful tone, does the Yunlu Academy have a second-rank great scholar? No. Su Nian shook his head and said regretfully, in the past 200 years, there has only been a 3rd-grade great scholar. The 3rd-grade great scholar is the fate-establishing realm. I only heard about it from my teacher when I was sending off layman Zi Yang. Our academy's dean is a rank 3 life-establishing master. Su Qian's tone suddenly became relaxed, and he commented casually, not bad. The 3 old gentlemen seemed to be a little boastful and frivolous, lacking a little calmness and seriousness. Su Qian told Su Erlang his evaluation. They weren't like this in the past. After the gentleman realm, it's the 3rd stage of the life-establishing realm. This might have something to do with the life-establishing realm. Yes, layman Zi Yang used to be like this too, but recently, he's changed his personality. I heard from my teacher that layman Zi Yang is only half a step away from establishing life. The 2 brothers strolled aimlessly around the academy. Su Zinian brought him to visit some famous places. As the academy with a long history of 1,200 years, if it were not for the fact that it was usually forbidden for outsiders to enter and disturb the students' study, Mount Qingyun would have become a tourist spot. Big brother. As they were walking, Su Nian suddenly shouted in a deep voice. Su Qian stopped and looked at him. Su Nian glanced at him, then turned his face away and pretended to look around. I thought about it for a long time yesterday. If it weren't for you, father would have been beheaded and his female family members would have been taken into the Imperial Academy. If it wasn't for you, little sister Lingyu would have been in danger yesterday. It's very likely that he was bullied by that Zhou guy. If it wasn't for you, the Su family might still be immersed in the luck of surviving a disaster, and then one day, they would suddenly be exterminated. After he finished speaking, he strode forward for more than 10 meters and said silently, "Thank you. Quasi-Saint Academy." Su Qian followed his cousin up the steps, past the incense burner, and into the hall. A 7-meter-tall red-painted pillar supported the dome. The quasi-saint that was worshipped in the academy was the founder of the Yunlu Institute. In the thin flame of the candle, the quasi-saint was wearing a blue lapel Confucian robe and a tall Confucian crown. One hand was behind his back and the other was on his waist, looking into the distance. Beside the quasi-saint was a beautiful white deer. One could vaguely see cloud patterns on its white fur. Su Nian pointed at the white deer and said, "This is the origin of the name of Yunlu Academy." "Scholars are elegant," Su Qian said. "The white deer is the mount." Su Nian glanced at his cousin and corrected him, "It's not a mount, it's a wife." Su Qian re-examined the quasi-sage and muttered, "There's no difference." He didn't dare to say this out loud. Su Nian seemed to know what his cousin was thinking and said, "In the records of Cloud Deer of the Academy, it was recorded that this white deer was a demon. It sat down and listened to the scriptures of the sage before it transformed into a human and accompanied the quasi-sage. The human and demon had been together since they were young and had a deep relationship. They became husband and wife. The love between a human and a demon was not allowed to exist in the world at that time. It was the same now. However, after the sage found out, he didn't break up the couple. Instead, he agreed to their marriage. Boundless love. It can be seen that as long as there is love, humans and demons can also live together. Since ancient times, the love between humans and demons had a nickname, like the unity of heaven and man. So, what was the nickname of this quasi-saint? Pointing out a deer as a horse, the horse's horse? Su Qian cupped his hands at the quasi-saint statue. As Su Zinian was respectfully greeting the quasi-saint, Su Qian looked around the hall and found a stone tablet as tall as a person on the left and right sides of the hall. One side was blank, while the other side was carved with words. He walked in front of the tablet and read, "Repaying the king's kindness with justice, your name will be passed down for generations, Cheng Hui." The handwriting was neat, not sloppy, not scribbled, not exaggerated, giving people a feeling of a gentleman's magnanimity. This was left behind by the quasi-saint from the directorate. Su Nian walked over and stood in front of the stone tablet with his cousin. "A quasi-saint from the directorate, that's right. I've never been clear about the details of the grudges between the directorate and the Yunlu Academy." Su Qian was very interested, and the word "eat melon" was written in his eyes. Su Nian looked around and saw no one around. Then he said in a low voice, "This matter starts from the war for the throne 200 years ago. Fight for the country's foundation." Although Su Qian was an amateur in history, he still knew what it meant to fight for the country's foundation. The crown prince was the foundation of the country. Fighting for the country was to fight for the position of the crown prince. At that time, the Renzong was in power, and the position of crown prince had been vacant for more than 10 years. The two princes were strong competitors at that time. One was the eldest son of the emperor, and the other was a prince born of a concubine. That noble was very charming, and was deeply loved by the Renzong. When the benevolence sect decided to make a common-born prince the crown prince, they were opposed by the entire court. The benevolence sect had issued many edicts, but they were all rejected by the cabinet. At that time, the ones who led the court were the scholars of Yunlu Academy. The rules of the ancient times have been established, and not even the emperor can go against them. Big brother, you're right. The ritual system is a dragon-slaying technique used by scholars. In this war of national importance, neither side was willing to admit defeat. They fought for 6 whole years. During this period, 4 people were changed in the cabinet, and 1 batch of officials left the court. There were more than 200 officials involved in the capital and other places. Chapter 43. 43 Chapter 43 Inscription_1. It was only then that a scholar from Yunlu Academy took over the position of the cabinet's first assistant. He did not continue to adhere to the ideals of the seniors and resolutely threw himself under the command of the benevolence sect. The heated battle for the foundation of the country had finally ended. Because of this matter, Yunlu Academy was detested by the benevolence sect. He realized that the existence of Yunlu Academy wasn't beneficial to the rule of the imperial power. At this time, Cheng Hui proposed to set up the imperial college and let the court cultivate its own talents. And the decline of the scholarly faction also began from here. This was the origin of the conflict between Yunlu Academy and the Directorate regarding the Orthodox Confucians. The Imperial College was National University while Yunlu Academy was Private one. How could Private one beat National University? Su Qian suddenly realized. After Su Nian finished speaking, he asked in a testing tone, "What do you think?" Big brother, well, I'm referring to the competition for the national capital. It has nothing to do with academia. Did he think that a bumpkin like Big Brother wouldn't be able to answer academic questions? On the surface, it's a fight for the country's foundation, but in reality, it's a fight for power, Su Qian said with a smile. If a scholar wants to fulfill his ambitions, he must hold great power, and the power of a country is fixed. When you hold more power, others will lose their power. The highest realm of factional disputes is to make an emperor a figurehead, to become an uncrowned emperor. Su Nian was just casually testing her, but when he heard this, his expression changed. What, did I say something wrong? Su Qian gave him a sideways glance. That's right, but you can't say that. Su Nian took a deep breath and continued. Su Qian nodded. No matter how powerful the dragon-slaying technique of the Confucians is, the imperial power is still stronger. After learning the arts, they would be sold to the emperor's family. This sentence explained everything. Since ancient times, no matter if they are corrupt or virtuous, as long as they are powerful officials, they will not have a good ending. Controlling the court was only temporary, and in the end, it would all be settled, because officials would always be officials. When Su Qian was reading history in his previous life, there were too many uncrowned emperors. Which one of them had a good ending? Cao Amon didn't count, but the chaotic times when the imperial power collapsed was another matter. Su Nian asked anxiously, is there any way to break it? The academy would not teach him what his big brother had told him. There's no solution. Su Qian shook his head and sighed. The court is like a battlefield. Party disputes are fun for a moment, but the whole family is cremated. His words were strange, but his eyes seemed to be brewing 1,000 years of history. Looking at her eyes, Su Nian was stunned. But Big Brother has another idea. Su Qian changed the topic. Big Brother, please speak. Qian Daru's deeds are a living example. When you can influence the fate of a country, you will go from a scholar attached to the imperial power to a strong person who can sit on equal footing with the imperial power. Su Nian's eyes lit up, and a look of joy appeared on his face. Then, he heard Su Qian say leisurely, Erlang is very intelligent, and you can be taught. Su Erlang then realized that he was the one testing him. Su Qian didn't continue speaking as he pondered over a question in his heart. Even though Yunlu Academy's future in the officialdom had been cut off, it was still a holy land that controlled the Confucian cultivation system. He would only end his official career. Although Su Zinian didn't say whether it was the Academy's official career or the entire Confucian system that was weakening, Su Qian felt it was the latter. This was because he had recalled what Su Erlang had said by the waterfall in the past 200 years, the highest rank the scholarly faction had ever reached was the third stage. Was it because after the third stage, the scholarly system had to enter the field and become an official? Or did it involve the luck of the scholarly faction? Then what is the meaning of this monument? Why is it standing here? He asked. Su Nian stared at the words on the stele with a complicated expression. He sighed and said, "This is the follow-up to the struggle for the right path in the Confucian school, or rather, a part of it. That Ji Shanqing was extremely talented. After he established the directorate, he knew that if he wanted to surpass the Yunlu Academy, he had to have his own education system. Otherwise, the students of the directorate would still be students of the Yunlu Institute. Thus, he devoted himself to studying the classics of the saints, reannotated them, and integrated them with his own thoughts. After 13 years, we've finally established an education system that has surpassed our teachers. Using justice to destroy human desires." Su Qian's heart moved. Su Erlang nodded. After the conversation just now, he was willing to explain academic problems to his rough cousin. He said, "Ji Shanqing believes that everything in the world follows a certain law, and this law is called reason. Reason is the most essential thing in the world, and it is also the most correct thing. Everything depends on reason and only then can it flourish. However, in the chaos of the world, people will lose themselves and lose their sense of reason. Is that why you want to eliminate human desires with the heavenly justice?" Su Qian said. The outline of the Directorate's school of thought was to eliminate human desires with justice. Su Qian was waiting for Su Nianyan's explanation on how to do it. Su Nian continued, "Ji Shanqing has made a set of rules for the saints. If scholars follow these rules, they will not make mistakes. They are correct and in line with the laws of heaven and earth. This set of rules has elevated loyalty, filial piety, integrity, and righteousness to the level of heavenly justice." Su Nian sneered. "If the king wants the subject to die, the subject has no choice but to die. If the father wanted the son to die, the son had to die, sacrificing his life for the greater good. In order to preserve my integrity, I must die." Su Qian listened in silence. Suddenly, he asked, "Then what do you think, is this right or wrong?" Su Nian was stunned. He looked at his cousin in a daze. He opened his mouth to speak, but a mysterious force was stuck in his throat, making him unable to speak. Su Qian understood that this power was called thought imprisonment. "That's why there's this tablet." Su Qian turned his gaze back to the inscription. "Yes." Su Erlang nodded his head. "The battle between Yunlu Academy and the Directorate is a battle of learning and ideals. However, this monument has stood in the quasi-saint academy for 200 years and has never fallen. As long as it doesn't fall, the Yunlu Academy will never be able to win against the Directorate. The dean has been sitting in the academy for more than 10 years. He has exhausted all his knowledge and tried to refute the things recorded on the stele. He tried to create a more mature and correct idea, but he failed. Because it represents the truth and correctness." Su Qian said. "Yes." Su Nian sighed. "It's not just the dean. In fact, all the great Confucians and teachers of the academy have been competing with the stele. No one has succeeded. How can the thoughts of a quasi-saint be refuted by ordinary people?" That blank tablet at the side. Su Qian had a guess in his heart. It was set up by the dean, but he has never put a brush on it for more than 10 years. Su Nianzhen pointed at the table beside the empty stone tablet and said. Later on, some students and great Confucians tried to inscribe words on the stone tablet to compete with Chen Yasheng's, but they would be erased the next day. However, the pen and ink stone on the table were left behind. Perhaps the hospital director also has a trace of expectation. Because of this, whenever the students have a sudden idea and feel that they are outstanding, they will come here to inscribe. It's a pity that the person the principal was looking forward to never appeared. I once thought that I could, and I also inscribed words on the stone tablet. Su Nian didn't continue. Obviously, he didn't want to tell his cousin about his frivolity in the past to avoid another social death. To repay the king's kindness with justice, and to be famous for generations to come. Su Qian was silent for a moment before he said in a deep voice. Farewell. Big brother asks you, is the king more important or is the world more important? Of course, Su Nian replied without hesitation. It's the people of the world. Then why do you study? Su Qian asked again. Su Nian subconsciously said, be loyal to the emperor and serve the country. After he finished speaking, he was stunned. Su Qian didn't care and continued to ask, is it really a scholar's lifelong pursuit to leave their name in history? Su Nian didn't answer. His silence explained everything. The actions of the two great Confucians of Yunlu Academy in order to freeload poems explained everything. Su Qian sighed. If the monarch wanted the subject to die, the subject had to die. Why? If the father wanted the son to die, the son had to die. Why? Can't there be more human rights in this dog shit society? Su Qian laughed. I'm not a scholar, but I want to write something. I want you to bid farewell to the past and help me grind it. Su Nian frowned. Su Qian said, the brush and ink are here anyway. Aren't they for people to write? If Big Brother doesn't write well, someone will naturally erase it tomorrow. After Su Nian heard this, he went to grind the ink. After a while, he stood in front of the monument with a brush and asked, Big Brother, what do you want to write? I'm going to write it myself this time. Su Qian snatched the brush from him and stared at the blank stone tablet. The face of the stall owner who was having breakfast this morning suddenly appeared in his mind. He was clearly in pain, but he didn't dare to ask for money. He was as pitiful as a dog. The problem of minor officials in the Daifeng dynasty had been a problem for a long time. The hall was full of beasts and birds who claimed to be loyal to the monarch and loved the country, but they had never cast a pitiful look at the people at the bottom. He thought of Zhou Li's arrogant and domineering attitude when he galloped his horse on the street. He thought of the records in the capital's yamen about running amok without fear. The existence of extraordinary martial strength made the disadvantages of feudal dynasties more and more incisive. It also made the people at the bottom of the society not even have the courage to rise up and resist. In his previous life, he had at least heard of a few vigorous peasant uprisings. However, in this world, peasant uprisings were quickly extinguished before they even had the chance to take shape. Su Qian took a deep breath and exhaled heavily. He picked up his pen and wrote. For the sake of the heavens and earth, for the sake of the people, for the sake of inheriting the supreme arts, for the sake of peace for the world. Su Qian felt refreshed after he finished writing. He threw the pen away and said loudly, bidding farewell to the past, this is what a scholar should do. Boom. It was as if a bolt of lightning had struck Su Siju's mind, splitting apart his chaotic spiritual consciousness and severing the shackles of his soul. He looked at his cousin in a daze. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but Su Erlang seemed to have seen a dense purple cloud flash above his cousin's head. Cacat. The stone tablet on the side suddenly made a cracking sound, and a huge crack appeared from top to bottom. The two brothers were shocked. Before they could react, the entire quasi-saint academy started to shake. The dust on the dome started to fall, and the candlesticks toppled over. The quasi-saint statue gave off a burst of clear air, breaking through the white clouds on the top of the mountain, and strange phenomena could be seen from dozens of miles away. Su Qian was dumbfounded, and his expression was extremely ugly. What's going on? All right, he seems to have caused trouble. What trouble? What trouble? Su Nian was agitated and said loudly, what does this have to do with us? We've never been to the Quasi-Saint Academy. After he finished speaking, he grabbed his head and ran out of the door, escaping. Scholar, wait for me. Su Qian ran after him, thinking that scholars were really good at adapting to changes at such a critical moment. P.S. The science in the book is an academic style that I derived from Cheng and Zhu's science. It's very different from science in reality, so don't take it seriously. This was a method of drawing materials from reality and then modifying it. After all, you asked me to create an academic style from scratch. Well, if I'm that good, why would I write a novel? The reason why I explained it was mainly because Cheng and Zhu's philosophy was polarized, which would easily lead to unnecessary war of words, so I have to make it clear. Please recommend me, cuties. Chapter 44. Chapter 44, Escape, 1. The two brothers ran out of the Quasi-Saint Academy, but they didn't dare to take the main road. They turned into the forest from a small path beside the courtyard and ran for a long time before stopping. Su Qian's breathing was steady, while Su Nian was holding a pine tree, panting. Because of the strenuous exercise, his white face was flushed. What do we do now? Su Qian planned to ask his methodical little brother, and probed. Did I just solve a difficult problem for the academy? He didn't expect that his words would cause such a terrible phenomenon, and he didn't know what the aftermath would be, so he followed Su Erlang and escaped. Su Nian panted and tried to calm his heartbeat. He snorted arrogantly. At most, it'll be a difficult problem for 200 years. Su Qian took off the water bag and handed it over. Su Erlang took a sip and continued, if it was me who had just entered the academy, I would suggest that you stay where you are and wait to receive the worship and gratitude of the academy's teachers and students. But now, I just want to take you away from here. He threw the water bag back to his cousin and waited for a moment. He saw that his cousin's expression was normal and there was no doubt. There was some disappointment and some admiration. He admired him because his cousin was very smart, unlike his father, who was a crude person. This made the proud Su Nian feel gratified. He was disappointed that he couldn't show off in front of his cousin and create a sense of superiority in terms of intelligence. That's right, even if his cousin had composed many amazing poems, even if his cousin had just written such a sentence on the stone tablet that could split the mountains and split the earth, Su Nian still felt that his IQ was higher. Without this mentality, I can't do. If the heavens don't give birth to me, I'll wish for a new year, and I'll pray for eternity like a long night. The two brothers quickly shuttled through the forest and sneaked in the direction of the stable. Leaving without saying goodbye was the best choice at this moment. If Su Qian remained at the scene, he might be welcomed by the Yunlu Academy's deep gratitude and even be revered as a great scholar, although it was unlikely. This was a good thing. The bad side was also very obvious. Yunlu Academy and the Directorate were fighting for orthodoxy. While Su Qian accepted the gratitude of Yunlu Academy, he would definitely attract the hostility of the scholars from the Directorate. All the Zuzigi in the court were directorates. A single case of monetary tax could cause endless trouble, and this was even more dangerous and troublesome than 100 cases of monetary tax. Reminiscing about the past and my thoughts are in line, Su Qian chuckled, old times, you're a real dog. Very good. Erlang was not a pedantic scholar. Perhaps this was because he was well versed in military tactics. Rough iron. Su Nian retorted and continued, as long as we leave, I believe the academy will not spread the news and will keep it a secret for us. He didn't speak any more. As he hurried on, he was deep in thought, appearing to be reticent. On the field outside the Saints' Academy, the gray-haired Zhao Xiao, who was dressed in linen clothes, suddenly made an unexpected move. He turned around and looked behind the academy. A few seconds later, the three great Confucians did the same thing and looked into the distance with grave expressions. The Grand Princess was puzzled and subconsciously followed their gaze. The sky was clear and there was nothing there. However, in the next moment, a stream of clear air that was visible to the naked eye soared into the sky and pierced through the clouds. The thick and heavy white clouds floating on Mount Qingyun dispersed in front of everyone's eyes. Zhao Xiao was the first to disappear. The three great Confucians then used their magical ability to move 3 feet behind the academy. The eldest princess's willowy brows furrowed slightly. She lifted the hem of her dress and quickly followed behind without losing her bearing. She was tall and curvaceous, and her charm when she walked was indescribable. In the quasi-saint academy, the candle stand was tilted, and the wax was flowing. In the empty hall, the air rippled like a spring breeze, highlighting Zhao Xiao's figure. He quickly scanned every corner of the hall and then focused on the cracked inscription of the Cheng clan's quasi-saint. The dean's pupils were like ancient wells, and wild waves were set off in them. At the same time, he quickly analyzed the reason for the soaring clear air. The monolith inscriptions that suppressed the academy shattered, and the noble spirit within Yunlu Academy broke free from its restraints. It overflowed and caused the scene just now. The problem was, how could the steel of the Cheng clan's quasi-saint crack for no reason? Soon, school head Zhao understood. His gaze was attracted by the stone tablet that he had erected in the hall. As he looked at the contents of the stone tablet, he felt as if the entire world was fading and disappearing. Only that line of ugly words was deeply imprinted in his eyes. It was imprinted in his heart. He became the only one in the world. The figures of the 3 great Confucians appeared in the spring breeze like air. They subconsciously scanned the entire hall. When he saw the broken Cheng clan's quasi-saint stone tablet, his pupils shrank unconsciously. Why did the stone tablet crack for no reason? No, this was a good thing. It meant that the seal that suppressed Yunlu Academy's luck had started to waver. Li Mubai thought to himself. Suddenly, he realized that there was something wrong with the director's condition. It was a state of being immersed in one's own world, as if one had lost their soul. The stone tablet had actually cracked. In an era where there were no quasi-saints, there was actually someone who could move the Cheng clan's stone tablet. Zhang Shen and Chen Tai looked at each other and saw shock and doubt in each other's eyes. Immediately after, they, like Li Mubai, noticed Director Zhao's abnormality. For the sake of heaven and earth, for the sake of the people, for the sake of inheriting the supreme arts, for the sake of setting the balance for all generations, Zhang Shen muttered. He was completely shocked by the spirit, and ambition contained in these words. Goosebumps rose all over his body, and the blood in his chest seemed to be boiling. This is what a scholar should really do. Chen Tai's lips trembled. As an official, I should serve the people, the country, and the people of the world. I should not serve a single family or a few people. This great scholar, who was known for his talent in governing the country, was trembling uncontrollably at this moment. His voice was hoarse. Enlightenment, enlightenment. Li Mubai took in a deep breath and calmed his emotions. Who wrote this? The 3 of them looked at Director Zhao Xiao at the same time. The director had been in seclusion for more than 10 years and had worked hard to overthrow the Cheng family's philosophy. If there was anyone in the world who could create a new academic school, it would be him. However, the dean was with them just now, and his attitude had explained everything. Silence was the only response they got. After a long time, Zhao Xiao said in a low voice, "You guys go out first. If you have anything to say, we can discuss it later." A gentleman's silence, he continued. The 3 great Confucians bowed and left side by side. The door of the hall was closed, and it was quiet all around. Zhao Xiao stood in front of the steel in silence. Behind him was a hollow door and window, allowing the sunlight to enter. After a long time, he straightened his clothes and saluted the disciple in front of the steel. When you hear the Dao in the morning, you can die in the evening. The eldest princess lifted the hem of her dress and finally arrived outside the quasi-saint academy. However, she discovered that the area within 100 feet of the academy was covered by an air shield that was like an upside-down bowl, isolating it from the outside world. She was not in a hurry. She stood quietly at the bottom of the steps outside the academy, like a flower in full bloom. After a while, the three great Confucians came out side by side. Their faces were solemn, but it was impossible to tell if they were good or bad. "Three sirs, may I know what it is?" The royal princess looked at the academy. "Princess, please don't ask." Chen Tai bowed. "We can't figure out anything about this matter for the time being." The eldest princess smiled, her face that could not hide her nobility was as calm as ever. After bidding farewell to the three great Confucians, she walked alone in the direction of the pavilion. Her dress fluttered in the mountain wind, as if she was a fairy from the mountains, a fairy who had come down to the mortal world to play. The 2 rows of soldiers were still standing guard outside the pavilion like silent statues. This group of 24 golden guards was her personal guard, and there was another group of 7 night watchmen at the foot of the mountain. However, the academy loathed Wei Yuan and did not allow anyone to go up the mountain during the night watch. The eldest princess went down the mountain with her guards and found the 7 night watchmen waiting by the side of the official road. Her voice was clear and beautiful. Yunlu Academy's aura is soaring to the heavens. The quasi-saint academy has been sealed. Report this matter to Duke Wei and ask him to keep a close eye on the academy and investigate this matter. Yes. The night watchman cupped his fists. The eldest princess continued, help me investigate a person, the fast runner of the Chang'an County government, Su Qian. Yes, sir. Chapter 45. 45 Big Brother is really annoying. 1. Stargazing Tower, 8 Trigram Stage. A white-robed, white-haired, and white-bearded supervisor sat in front of a table, twirling a cup of wine in his hand as he silently gazed toward the northwest of the capital. There was another table on the left, and it was filled with delicious food. In front of the table sat the oval-faced, big-eyed Yan Keiwei, who had exquisite facial features and a hidden sweetness. As she ate, she continued to chatter, Master, when can I reach the 6th rank and become an alchemist? The time will come when you stop eating and focus on cultivation, the supervisor replied with a smile. That's impossible in this lifetime. Yan Keiwei said with difficulty. She swallowed the food and continued to ramble, by the way, fake silver is easy to burn. It explodes when thrown into water. It can't be preserved at all. It's not good to report to the emperor like this. The emperor has nothing better to do, just tell him to get lost, the supervisor said softly. Li Keiwei stuck out the tip of her tongue. I don't dare to say that. You can go by yourself. The supervisor smiled kindly. Master, 4th senior brother is going crazy. He's always running out of the city, saying that the door to the profound meaning of alchemy is already open for him. Master, I think Su Qian is a good guy. Can't we take him in? Oh, you don't know who he is. He's the one who solved the tax and silver case. Master, what is grafting? Keiwei, the supervisor sighed. Master, please speak. Can't you shut your mouth even when you're eating? After a few seconds. Master, why do you keep looking over there? Keiwei, Master has some regrets. Master, why don't you know the forbidden technique of the scholarly faction? A proud expression had just appeared on Yan Keiwei's face when she suddenly realized that the food on the table had instantly rotted and was emitting an unpleasant stinky smell. She pouted her little mouth and looked like she was about to cry. Her heart ached so much that she couldn't breathe. Master, I was wrong. Quickly change back. The supervisor was still looking in the northwest direction and said with a smile, I'll teach you one more thing. In the field of alchemy, most of the transformations are irreversible. As she wiped her tears, she left in tears. I'll never come back to accompany you again, old man. In the pavilion next to the bamboo forest, Director Zhao Xiao said in a deep voice, "No one is allowed to get within 300 feet of this place." As he spoke, he waved his sleeve, and the clear air expanded, covering a radius of 300 feet around the pavilion. After doing this, he turned around and looked at the three great Confucians who had been summoned. Li Muibai held the teacup in his hands and had a solemn expression, "I've asked around." At that time, there were no students near the quasi-saint academy. I also didn't know who entered. The words on the stele don't belong to any student of the academy. To be able to write such ugly words, I don't think he's from our academy. After saying this, Li Muibai felt a little guilty. If he wasn't a student of the academy, who else could he be other than that cheap disciple? Do. At this time, Zhang Shen knocked on the table. This great scholar put away all his cynicism and retorted his friend with a blank expression. Handwriting can be disguised, and ugly words are even more so. Then, what's the reason for the disguise? Chen Tai suddenly asked. That monument had been erected there for more than 10 years, and all the teachers and students in the academy had tried it. They were all willing to be the hero. There was no reason to disguise the handwriting. Furthermore, Su Siju and Su Ningjian happened to be on a mountain trip. The three great Confucians finished their discussion and didn't speak for a long time. Li Muibai sipped the tea in his cup and sighed, "For the sake of heaven and earth, for the sake of the people, for the sake of inheriting the supreme arts, for the sake of peace for the world. I'm ashamed. I've long given up on the idea of an official career. I only want to leave my name in history. Brother Chunjing has a noble character and unquestionable integrity." Zhang Shen gave him a thumbs up and praised him, then continued, "Let me guide you on the poems." Li Muibai immediately changed his words, "For the country and its people, it's not contradictory to leaving a name in history." Director Zhao Xiao was stunned as he stared at Li Muibai. His eyes flashed as he asked in surprise, "You're about to establish your life?" Chen Tai and Zhang Shen were shocked. Li Muibai laughed as he stroked his beard, "I had a moment of enlightenment." The other two great Confucians instantly felt sour. After being exposed by Director Zhao Xiao, the two of them immediately felt a slight change in Li Muibai's aura. The third stage of the life-establishing realm was a realm where one searched for a goal in life. Some people read for the sake of fame, some read for the sake of wealth, and some read for the sake of blessing the future generations. Everyone had their own path. Dean Zhao Xiao's Dao was to create a new school of thought for the Confucians, to break the shackles of thought and find a new path for the millions of scholars in the world. Therefore, as long as he could not achieve this goal, he would not be able to break through to rank 2. The others didn't ask Li Muibai about his life goal. Because at this moment, he was also in a hazy state. Zhang Shen and Chen Tai looked at each other. They decided in their hearts that they would stay in the quasi-saint academy to comprehend the Dao and never come out again. From today onwards, the quasi-saint academy forbids students from entering. Zhao Xiao's eyes scanned across the Confucians present. "Don't tell anyone about this. I'm going to speak to the three of you." The three great Confucians looked at each other and nodded slightly. Zhao Xiao concentrated his qi in his dantian and gathered his strength on the tip of his tongue. A gentleman should keep his mouth shut. The two of them galloped quickly. When they were close to the capital, the brothers slowed down and let the horses gallop. They rented inferior horses, which were only slightly better than Fuma. The advantage was that they were cheap, but the disadvantage was that they had poor physical strength. Unable to maintain high-speed running for a long time. If he died, he would have to pay more than 10 taels of silver. The two brothers were both people who knew their wallets very well. Su Nian let out a breath of air and finally asked the question in his heart, "Big brother, shouldn't you explain?" He was referring to the shocking aphorism. "What do you want me to explain?" Su Qian asked. Big brother was only enlightened, how could he say such earth-shaking words? Su Nian proudly raised his chin. Look at how smug you are. Of all the lower class students, only the ones who are good at studying are good. I graduated from 9 years of compulsory education and police school. Moreover, he was an experienced keyboard warrior who was deeply influenced by the keyboard culture and knew a little about everything. That's something only scholars can say. Look at how smug you are. Of all the lower class students, only the ones who are good at studying are good. I graduated from 9 years of compulsory education and police school. Moreover, he was an experienced keyboard warrior who was deeply influenced by the keyboard culture and knew a little about everything. In terms of knowledge, you scholars are only little brothers in front of me. Su Qian really wanted to complain about this. He pondered for a moment and changed his words. Salao also felt that there were some problems with the current Confucian thinking, but when I asked you what a scholar should do, your answer was still the standard answer of the times. Su Nian fell into deep thought. This is the limitation of one's thinking. You scholars are influenced by some kind of thinking, and over time, you have become like it. Even if they realize something is wrong, it'll be hard for them to break free. Su Qian said. Let's put it in another way, mental imprisonment. Thought imprisonment. Su Siju repeated the words. Yunlu Academy's headmaster is also restricted by his thoughts and is affected by the Cheng clan's learning. He wants to break through and find a new school of thought, but he's in the vortex himself, so how can he lead all the scholars in the world out of it? The only ones who can do it are those who are outside the vortex. Maybe it's because I haven't read many books that I'm able to take an unconventional path, stand out from the masses, and not be confined by the Cheng clan's science. Of course, I also have the mental shackles from the 21st century, but no one has given me a hard time. Su Qian said in his heart. To put it bluntly, the confinement of one's thoughts was the three views, which were created by the times. You're in this era and have been influenced by it, so you won't find it a problem. Only when the time scale reached a certain distance could one be able to see the problem from a higher position. Su Siju did not speak for a long time. He began to think and examine the objects. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, he looked at Su Qian with a bright and energetic expression. Big Brother's words have enlightened me. Big Brother is so amazing. His comprehension was very strong. Su Qian made his evaluation in his heart, but he did not take it seriously on the surface. Instead, he revealed a mocking expression. It's a pity that you didn't inherit the good genes of my Su family. You inherited the good genes of the Li family. Big Brother is so annoying. Su Siju suddenly didn't feel like talking to him. If his mother heard this, she would be so angry that she would slam the table and curse. This little rascal's birth characters were exactly the opposite of his mother's. Chapter 46. 46 Buying Jewelry, 1. After returning to the capital, Su Qian returned the horse to the horse store and took back the deposit. He walked out of the shop and said, Farewell, you can go back first. I still have something to do. Su Nian nodded and didn't ask any more questions. He walked along the long street alone in the direction of his home. Su Qian bought some osmanthus cake on the street and ate it while walking. Soon, they arrived at a jewelry shop. Treasure Instrument Pavilion. The boss of Treasure Tool Pavilion was a scholar. In fact, it was very common for scholars to do business, especially for those rich and powerful families. It was impossible to support a large family's rotten living expenses just by collecting land rent. The large shops, brothels, and other profitable businesses in the capital all had the shadow of the aristocrats behind them. Dafeng's commerce is clearly unprecedentedly developed, but the heavy taxes are on the farmers. I have reason to suspect that this is the doing of the powerful nobles. How much money can we earn from farming? If we want to be rich, we have to get wool from the merchants. If we want the people to live better and make Dafeng's national treasury richer, we must reform. But in the imperial court, we look down on all the officials, and it's not my place to speak. Let's set a small goal. First, I'll train Erlang to become the Prime Minister of Dafeng. Su Qian couldn't help but smile at the thought of his arrogant little brother's future. Su Qian stepped into the shop. He glanced at the counter and saw the jewelry on the red silk. Hairpin, 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 Bio, was hung. It was dazzling. Among them, gold was the most expensive, and jade depended on the type. The expensive one was more expensive than gold, while the cheap one was about the same as silver. Su Qian touched the 3 silver coins in his pocket and muttered in his heart, "I can't buy any precious jewelry with this amount of money." He was lamenting about his lack of money when he stepped on a hard lump. He picked it up naturally and put it in his pocket without a change in expression. Perhaps it was because he had been too natural, no one had paid attention to him. A penny of silver is useless. A penny of gold is more like it. He felt as if he was shopping in a luxury store in his previous life. He couldn't afford it anyway. The only difference was that the store owners now were very reserved and not as annoying as the waiters in his previous life, who couldn't wait to stick to you and let you spend immediately. "Sir, do you have a discount here?" Su Qian knocked on the counter. The shopkeeper was an old man with a goatee and dressed like a scholar. He was not surprised to hear this. The shopkeeper pointed at the fortune stick hanging on the wall and said with a smile, "Objective, if you can solve the riddle, I can give you half of the toys in the shop." This rule was a specialty of Treasure Instrument Pavilion. A half-price discount on the riddle. Interesting. Su Qian walked to the wooden stick and glanced at the riddle on it. Yun Po Yu, Huanongjing. With his rich knowledge and logical reasoning, he quickly solved the riddle. Some of the jewelry cost a few dollars just in weight, plus the labor costs. Su Qian estimated that even with a 50% discount, he still couldn't afford good jewelry. However, he soon found a way. The women who could come to Treasure Instrument Pavilion to buy jewelry all came from well-to-do families and had studied for a few years, so at least they were not illiterate. Such women all had a problem. Half a bucket of water was still clattering. He felt that he was a cultured person who liked to be artistically attached to people, so he was particularly addicted to the little tricks of Treasure Instrument Pavilion. They liked to buy jewelry at the same price at Treasure Pavilion, not for anything else but to solve a word puzzle. If the riddle was solved, the shopkeeper would engrave the correct riddle on the wooden stick and then give it to the customer along with the jewelry. It was fine if they didn't solve it, but once they solved 1 or 2 word riddles, they could brag to their close friends. This was what Su Qian had analyzed from the conversation of the 2 young women beside him. As expected of a shop opened by a scholar, it knew how to attract high-end customers. "Big sister Yu, I can't solve any of the riddles here. It's so difficult." "Younger sister is right. The innkeeper is a master scholar with a scholarly reputation. The questions he sets are naturally difficult. Ordinary scholars might not be able to solve them." "Sister Yu, my Lang Jun said the same thing. If I can solve the riddle and take the wooden stick away, I'll definitely impress my Lang Jun." "You're dreaming. Aya, you're so annoying." The 2 girls looked at the stick for a long time, mumbling. They were all dressed exquisitely. They must have come from well-to-do families and had received a certain level of education. Otherwise, they would not have tried to solve the riddles. "My 2 wives." Suddenly, a man's voice came from the side. The 2 beautiful ladies turned their heads vigilantly. When they saw the handsome and tall Su Qian, their vigilance was slightly reduced, but they did not speak. The atmosphere in the Dafeng dynasty was relatively free, but it was still very rude to talk to a strange man on the street. Su Qian didn't care and went straight to the point. "This one can solve the riddles for the 2 ladies, but the 2 ladies will share half of the silver saved with me. For the 5 coins saved, you will share 2.5 coins with me. You can give me 2 of the 4 coins you save." Hearing Su Qian's suggestion, the shopkeeper looked up in surprise. After examining him for a moment, he sneered and ignored him. Although this person was dressed in a scholar's robe, One only needed to look carefully at his physique and skin color to know that he was someone who would slap his face until it swelled up. Have you ever seen a scholar as strong as an ox with wheat-colored skin? The Confucian robe did not fit him at all. The younger woman's eyes sparkled at Su Qian's suggestion. She was quite tempted. The older ones were more dignified and reserved, but also more cautious and distant. They said lightly, "Young master, please do as you please. If you really solve the riddle, I will not renege on my debt." He had a strong sense of distance. "Two ladies, choose one," Su Qian said with a smile. The older woman was a little hesitant, while the younger one was eager to try. Seeing that the older sister beside her did not object, she pointed to one of the wooden sticks. "Yun Po Yu, Huanangjing." Her voice was soft. "The capable do more work," Su Qian immediately said. The two ladies subconsciously turned their heads to look at the shop owner, and the shop owner's dumbfounded expression explained everything. At that moment, the young lady bought a gold hairpin and happily held it in her hand. His eyes sparkled as he looked at Su Qian. After she kept the stick, her eyes turned and her tone became more familiar. "Young master, can you continue to solve the riddle for me?" Lin, the woman who was called Sister Yu, pulled her sleeve. "Big Sister Yu, we came here together. I have one, but you don't. That's not good." After saying that, Lin looked at Su Qian expectantly. "I couldn't ask for more." Su Qian showed a warm smile. "No problem. My wife, choose another one." "The peacock flies southeast." She pointed at a wooden stick. "Sun," Su Qian said. The shop owner was dumbfounded. "Thank you, young master." The two Lil Miss picked the jewelry they liked and left the shop, satisfied. Su Qian's hearing was amazing. He heard the woman called Lin say, "This young master is really talented. He's tall and handsome. He's much stronger than my Lang Jun." "Don't talk nonsense," the older woman reprimanded. She seemed to be afraid of being heard by Su Qian, so she came forward to pester him and quickly left with Lin. Part 3 of the series ends here. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe so we can be motivated to make even better videos in the future.